Music. It's not just part of our daily lives, it's part of our wrestling fandom as well, and it has been for decades. That's where this show comes in. Music of the Mat, the podcast devoted exclusively to the music of pro wrestling, hosted by Andrew Rich. Hey, that's me. Each episode delivers a different topic with a variety of great guests, fun conversations, musical analysis, and of course, a heartfelt pun or two. New episodes drop every other Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. Check out Music of the Mat only on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
What do you guys want to talk about?
You are listening to the Flagship Podcast with your hosts, Joe Lanza.
If this story was any good, maybe you people would understand it. You don't even understand the story. It goes over everybody's head. How great can it be? Maybe they need to talk more during these matches.
And Rich Crage.
This is my entire life's goal, is to be a WWE superstar, and now I am the NXT Women's Champion.
You can take that. If you want that, great. Good for you. I want MJF talking about getting roadhead. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want out of my wrestling. Call me old-fashioned, Joe.
Yo, how you doing? It is your favorite wrestling podcast, greatest wrestling podcast in the world. It is the Flagship Podcast. This week, I am flying solo as Rich Craich is off visiting a tree. But we still have plenty of show for you. Tons to do as we have to preview AEW Dynasty. We're going to talk some New Japan Pro Wrestling and their show they had in Chicago and what they've got coming out of that with their new IWGP Heavyweight Champion Jon Moxley. We're going to talk some Pro Wrestling Noah and who knows what else along the way. But let's start here. I want to talk about the topic of media perception and the enormous canyon-sized gulf that exists between WWE's media perception and AEW's media perception and how that affects the business of both of those companies, but in particular, AEW. And I think it's a massive problem for AEW. Some of it is a product of how people consume media. Some of it is deliberate and intentional and strategic and systematic on the part of WWE. And smart, to be completely honest. But it exists. I mean, I've talked about it before. Tony Khan has said that he has said at times that AEW is under attack. And he's right. I've talked about it before. There's no denying that. You look around the media landscape, and we all know that wrestling media is an absolute cesspool. Wrestling media is a very unserious media. I say that as a member of it. It is largely driven by people desperately clinging to relevance, to remain relevant in the wrestling business, assorted grifters and con men taking advantage of not so bright fans who want to hear certain narratives pushed and exist in certain echo chambers. And it is also made up of a bevy of amateurs parading as professionals in terms of a lot of the people doing the reporting. And there just aren't a lot of serious people, serious professionals covering pro wrestling on a day in, day out basis. There just aren't. And we all know who those small handful of people are. And even some of those people, there's some micro issues that certainly can be brought up in terms of how they approach and do their jobs as well. But, let's just start sort of at the top of the wrestling media food chain, and that's with your most high-profile people in the wrestling media who speak to, in general, the largest audiences, and that's people like Eric Bischoff and Jim Cornette. And both of those people are obviously very much anti-AEW, anti-Tony Khan. Cornette legitimately despises the Elite and dislikes AEW and is not a big fan of Tony Khan and has been saying from day one that AEW is going to die. He said it would die within 6 months, and now he has built and cultivated an audience of people who tune in, to use an antiquated term, each and every week to hear the latest way that he is going to slander Tony Khan, AEW, the Elite, etc. And he leans into it. But I do think his dislike of AEW and the product is genuine, or at least more genuine than someone like Eric Bischoff, who continues to be platformed by people, whether it's Conrad Thompson or John Alba, who honestly should be ashamed of themselves for giving Bischoff the outlets to spew his absolute nonsense. Whereas I believe there's some legitimacy to Jim Cornette's feelings in regards to AEW, even though he's clearly leaning into a certain kind of audience when speaking about how he feels about it. Eric Bischoff is just a complete and total fraud. I mean, that guy's just a worker and a grifter, and he has nothing substantial. He has nothing of value to add to pro wrestling. I mean, he is a scourge on the pro wrestling business. He has nothing to offer but negativity, and he is a net negative, and he is hurting the pro wrestling business because he's an absolute fraud. I mean, just a couple of days ago, Eric Bischoff was on a show with Conrad Thompson talking about how Tama Tonga is a great young talent. A great young talent is how he described Tama Tonga, who obviously just recently debuted with WWE. Tama Tonga's 41 years old. I have nothing against Tama Tonga. He's a talented guy. I've talked about him for years. But it's just another example of Eric Bischoff exposing himself in a small way. He knows nothing of Tama Tonga. He knows nothing about him. Starting with how old he is. He's probably never seen him wrestle. But he signed with WWE. So he's a great young talent. Had Tama Tonga signed with AEW, we all know what Bischoff would be spewing. Oh, Tony Khan signed another difference maker that won't make a difference. Tony Khan's roster is too big and bloated. We know all the tired narratives that are out there, and that's exactly because that's what Eric does. He's a con man. He's always been a con man. He did a pro wrestling business podcast where he continually predicted the demise of a pro wrestling company that's on the verge of scoring a brand new television contract. Bischoff doesn't know what he's talking about. The thing is, Bischoff knows he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he has an audience that eats up his content, and that's all that matters, and he knows that. And the content that's valuable in the current climate is anti-AEW, anti-Tony Khan content. So Eric leans in. And Eric continues to spew nothing but nonsense. The guy knows nothing. In terms of the current wrestling scene, he's useless. He has nothing to offer pro wrestling. But he's one of the largest voices because of his past, and because of his name value. And that would be hard enough, but there's a whole second level of your Conans and Disco Infernos and Al Snows and Vince Russos who may not have the sizable audiences that Bischoff and Cornette have, but they still have a massive reach. They're still names and known commodities in the pro wrestling world, and fans are going to turn to them first before they turn to somebody like me, who they maybe have never heard of. And they're spewing a lot of the same nonsense again because anti-AEW rhetoric, whether it's your true feelings or not, they all know that it's good for business. There's a lot of people who like hearing that, who find comfort in that, who like that echo chamber of, hearing why AEW is bad and why it's going to fail. And they all have slightly different motivations, but the bottom line is it's advantageous to be anti-AEW in the current climate. And it even goes below that a level to your Twitter engagement accounts, your Twitter bots, your YouTubers. Go ahead and log on to YouTube and type in pro wrestling, watch a few videos, and you'll be inundated with YouTubers with thumbnails of the most unflattering picture of Tony Khan they could find, and whatever the AEW controversy of the week is, and why AEW is going to die, or why Tony Khan is out of control, or why, whatever the case may be. There is an entire cottage industry of this, starting at the top with your Bischoffs and your Cornettes, and extending downward to various levels. And that would be enough of a avalanche of negativity for AEW to overcome, if that's all there was. But there's so much more that I'm going to get into in a minute. And the counterbalance doesn't exist. See, even if some of these people I mentioned didn't currently like what was going on with WWE, they're not going to go as hard. You're not going to get massive, you're not going to get massive amounts of YouTubers and YouTube thumbnails spouting WWE negativity. WWE's hot right now. And a lot of people are enjoying WWE. They're having one of their best periods ever. They're having their best period ever in terms of revenue. So, if you're these various grifters or people looking to make a quick buck, how is it advantageous to bang on WWE? You run the risk of running people off. And the Venn diagram of people who don't like AEW and do enjoy WWE very much overlaps. Very much overlaps. So if any of these guys know that people are consuming their content to hear the constant bashing of AEW, they're not going to go that hard on WWE because they're going to risk running those people off. Because again, people enjoy echo chambers. People enjoy listening to like-minded voices. That's human nature. And these types of people are not going to consume content that's ripping on WWE right now if they're enjoying WWE. They want to hear you bash AEW. That's what they're coming for. And these guys know it. And that's why they lean in. Who's another target of these types of outlets? Dave Meltzer. Why? Because think of it this way. If you're Eric Bischoff and you have a business podcast, which I know he doesn't have that podcast anymore, but he did, and you're just spouting absolute nonsense on a weekly basis, okay? It's advantageous for you to bash someone who's not spouting nonsense, who's spouting facts, who's spouting 40 years of experience of knowing trends and where things are going, and who also, by the way, you haven't gotten along with in a number of years. And who also, by the way, fits into that same Venn diagram of people who dislike AEW for whatever reason, generally are distrustful and don't like Dave Meltzer. Why are they distrustful of him? Because of people like Eric Bischoff and many others constantly telling you how Dave Meltzer doesn't know anything and he's wrong and he's an idiot. A useful idiot, as Eric Bischoff termed it. Very useful to Eric, by the way. Because, look at it this way. Banging on Dave Meltzer is an enormous part of a lot of these people's business models. So he is very useful to Eric Bischoff, ironically enough. What would these people do without Dave? They should be paying him royalties. Conrad Thompson built an entire business around the work that Dave did for 40 years. But it's a key part of the playbook. Discredit the media. They don't know what they're talking about. Dave Meltzer doesn't know what he's talking about. I, Eric Bischoff, know what I'm talking about. The charismatic guy with the nice smile who actually worked in the business. He knows all the right chords to play. And it's all part of the game. And we've all seen the playbook outside of wrestling in how advantageous it is at times to discredit the media. Especially when the media is contradicting the bullshit that you're spewing. And then a lot of these other people on, these lower, they follow the leader. Or the leaders in this case. And spew the same rhetoric. I mean, there is a narrative out there that Dave Meltzer is on the take from AEW, which anyone who consumes Dave Meltzer's content knows that's nonsense. Forget being on the take, that's preposterous to begin with. But that Dave Meltzer is some flag-waving AEW homer is complete nonsense. He's super critical of AEW. In fact, the dirty secret is, if you consume Dave Meltzer's content, he's far more critical of AEW than he is WWE because WWE is clicking on all cylinders. Meltzer's customer base complains to Dave that he's too soft on WWE and too hard on AEW. But that would require you to be familiar with the man's content to know that, and it doesn't suit the interest of the grifters. Discrediting the media does. And this all ties back to this avalanche, this attack of anti-AEW media that Tony Khan has to somehow overcome. And it's almost impossible. Because there is no balance on the other side. There is no anti-WWE media because people are terrified to criticize WWE because they feel like it's bad for business. And that doesn't mean that there can't be a space that exists for just fair, honest critique. Of course there is. You're listening to a show right now that has built its reputation on fair, honest, and sometimes brutally honest opinions and critique. And we're thriving. We are thriving. But that took over a decade. That took almost 13 years of building a reputation of fair, honest, brutally honest at times critique. Coming from, all modesty aside, entertaining personalities with some charisma who have good chemistry, who deliver it all in an entertaining package. And look, that's not easy. And not everyone could do that. And not everyone's willing to put in the work for over a decade to get there. To where, this thing is a self-sustaining business that puts food on the table. So what's the shortcut? What's the quickest path? Well, what gets the most attention now? The most unflattering picture of Tony Khan possible, and the reason why AEW is dying this week. Now, you can sit there and say, and some of you probably are, oh yeah, right, people can just ignore that stuff. Yeah, you, a savvy Flagship listener who knows better, you could ignore it, and maybe you do. The problem is it then dominates algorithms. If you're not getting inundated with Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo and Jim Cornette, you're getting inundated with all of these, micropods and YouTubers that nobody has ever heard of. And if you go on social media, if you go on Twitter, you are just, if you click that godforsaken for you tab, you're just inundated with Twitter engagement accounts where, the number of WWE engagement accounts compared to AEW accounts has got to be conservatively 10-1. I'm talking paying for the blue check mark, anti-WWE, anti-AEW, pro-WWE engagement accounts compared to paying for the blue check mark. We're AEW cheerleaders. It's 10-1 minimum. And that's before we even get into the bots. So you could say, yeah, people can just ignore it. But, that's you, informed consumer of media. Not random wrestling fan who goes on YouTube and is just inundated with this stuff. It's a deluge on YouTube and social media. And it's hard to overcome when you're constantly being told that the company is dying, is going to die, that none of their stars are really stars or difference makers, or that, there's no stories. I don't have to go through every, one of these. You know the narratives. It's a lot. And that alone would be almost impossible to overcome. But it's not just that. It's the mainstream media, which, thanks to Nick Khan, very often will do the bidding of WWE. WWE also has a 40-year head start as the established pro wrestling brand. WWE is pro wrestling to a lot of people, so it already has that advantage. Enter Nick Khan, who had previous existing relationships with so many of the mainstream media outlets that WWE is tight with. And it's the more, for lack of a better term, professional wrestling media, the professional wrestling media, for lack of a better term, because there's not a lot of pros who do this. And the way WWE has systematically and strategically controlled the influential pro wrestling media as well. And how have they done that? That's largely Nick Khan. Nick Khan is now the most powerful person in pro wrestling. They'll let you think that Paul Levesque is. But it's Nick Khan. And how did Nick Khan ascend? Well, Nick Khan is a killer. He's a legitimate real-world alpha beast. Okay? And has been for years. And he entered a circus world run by circus clowns. Pro wrestling was easy for him. Vince self-destructed. Nick Khan's now the president of the company, and he's the most powerful person in the business. And he's the best hire Vince McMahon ever made. Not just with his ability to cut extremely advantageous media rights deals due to his connections that he's built over the years as a power agent, as the biggest power broker in sports media. Not just that, but because of the strategic control of both the mainstream media and the wrestling media that he has put in place since he's come into the company. And it's smart, and it's tactical, and it works, and it's the one area where WWE has a canyon-sized gulf of an edge over AEW. Did you see the media blitz that WWE was able to pull off WrestleMania week? Now, look, granted, again, 40-year head start. But this was the likes of which you've never seen. And that's all thanks to Nick Khan. That's all thanks to Nick Khan and his connections. And again, a real-world alpha beast entering a world of circus clowns. And applying real-world business strategies to this touring circus that was largely being run by clowns. Forget the grifters and the con men and the YouTubers and the engagement accounts and the micropods and the microsites that have largely ignored the lawsuit against WWE, against Vince McMahon. Vince is gone. That's all they're concerned with. And again, it doesn't suit their interest to talk about that story or pursue those stories. And there's really only a tiny handful of entities, forget the wrestling media, in media period, who are remaining on top of that. And set aside, again, the grifters and the low-level media. But think about why the mainstream media has largely just ignored this story after a quick burst of information when the lawsuit became public, the details of the lawsuit. That also is the Nick Khan effect. I'm not saying he's shaking people down or telling them not to report it. But he has great relationships with a lot of people. And now that's starting to filter down to the wrestling media. Are you familiar with Chris Legentil? Very few of you probably are. You may have seen him if you watched the WrestleMania post-show pressers. He was presented, I believe, on night 1. Given a cryon and everything with his name. You probably didn't make much note of it. I'm guessing less than 10% of you listening know who this guy is or have ever heard his name. He's one of the most important people in the company. And aside from Nick Khan, the most important person in all of pro wrestling in controlling the media. He was hired in April of 2021 with the title of Senior Vice President, Head of Global Communications. That's a fancy title for he runs the company's PR. And to understand how wrestling media operates is to understand how Chris Legentil and WWE PR operates. You can't fully grasp the former without understanding the latter. Now, Chris Legentil was recently in the news. He was hired 3 years ago to run PR, and we'll talk about that in a second, but he recently received another job. A press release from Nick Khan, the reorganization of talent relations. And I quote, WWE has begun the process of reorganizing its talent relations group. Moving forward, Chris Legentil, in addition to his role in comms, communications, will help us in leading the new group. Matt Altman, in addition to his role in marketing, will be working closely with Chris to help in this endeavor. Talent development and recruiting will now report into Shawn Michaels. All of talent, which includes talent relations, development, and recruiting, will continue to ultimately report into Paul Levesque. As of today, Dan Ventrell, could be Ventrelli, I don't know how to pronounce that, will be moving on from WWE. We thank Dan for his tremendous contributions, end quote. So Chris Legentil's moving on and up. He is not only the Senior VP, Head of Global Communications, which, by the way, if you go to the WWE website, you are directed to Chris Legentil if you have any media inquiries in the US or Canada. He's the guy. He's now heading up this reorganized talent relations department. And we'll see how it all settles. But that's who Chris Legentil is. Where did they find him? He worked for DAZN, the NBA, Showtime, previous to coming on board with WWE. He worked for many of Nick Khan's old cronies throughout the sports and entertainment business. And he's been running WWE's PR for the last 3 years and doing it in a very savvy, real-world way that nobody in pro wrestling has ever done it before. Now, when I say that most of you have probably never heard of him, that wouldn't apply to any media members listening because I'm sure that you have heard of him. I'm sure that you're intimately familiar with him. He's been described to me as Nick Khan's right-hand man. Another source, another media source, described him as polite and respectful. And in the interest of balance, he's also been described as, quote, a two-faced frat boy, end quote, by someone who worked close to him. Now, what does he do? He does very savvy PR. You know, the best way to describe PR is at your job, you probably have a human resources department. And many people will tell you, always keep human resources at arm's length. Why? Human resources, they feel like they're your friend. They feel like they're in your corner. What you always have to remember is that HR's primary job is to protect the company. To protect the company's interests and to protect the company's money. Now, sometimes protecting the company and protecting you, the employee, those things will intersect. And HR will very much be your friend in those scenarios. But HR's job is not to protect you, the employee. HR's job is to protect the interests and the money, ultimately the money, of the company you work for. PR for these gigantic companies like WWE very much operate in the same way. They'll be friendly to the media. Again, Legentil, polite, respectful. He'll give you his time. They want you to think they're your friend. But what is the job of public relations? To protect the image and ultimately the interests and the money of the company. So everything PR does has to be viewed through that lens. How does this relate back to Legentil? He's a known entity in wrestling media. He'll give you stories. His people will give you stories. His department will give you stories. But here's the catch. You can't put his name on it. You can't put any of his people's name on it. You can't put his department's name on it. You can't put WWE PR's name on it. Why does that matter? It matters because when there's a deluge of puff pieces out there in the wrestling media space, putting over things like Paul Levesque thanking the crew at WrestleMania, which was a real actual headline about a week ago. That's right. Paul Levesque thanked the crew at WrestleMania. And we were told it was heartfelt. What an amazing man. Accompanied by a dignified picture of Levesque, looking like a conquering soldier or a strong leader. A far cry from those unflattering pictures possible of Tony Khan attached to the latest 48-minute YouTuber rant on something he tweeted. You know, the important things in pro wrestling. So stories like Paul Levesque thanking the crew at WrestleMania, or the Fast Nationals, which was a story that yours truly, not OJ, but Joe Lanza, broke several years ago when all of a sudden we were getting Fast National numbers of SmackDown and Rampage on Saturdays. This is a few years ago now, and I broke this story on Twitter and talked about it on the Flagship. But it was me that did the digging, and I don't remember the exact number, years on, 3 or 4 different people in the media who were receiving these Fast Nationals, and they were coming directly from WWE PR. And if you recall, there was mainstream media putting it out. Sports media people, in addition to all of the wrestling media people, until most of the wrestling media people caught on to what the game was. And the sports media people who were doing a solid to Nick Khan and his right-hand man, reporting these unflattering Fast Nationals of Rampage and these flattering Fast Nationals of SmackDown, lost interest because wrestling's not their entire beat. To where the only one left doing them just a few weeks in was Cheeseboard Guy. And to this day, he's the only one still reporting the Fast Nationals because the game became clear. This was WWE's PR putting a negative spin on the competition and a positive spin on themselves, which is fine. But again, they don't want their name on it. When you as the consumer take stories like Fast Nationals, which by the way, if you notice, Cheeseboard only puts those out when they are unflattering to Rampage and when they are flattering to SmackDown. When SmackDown's down, no Fast Nationals. When Rampage is up, no Fast Nationals. And even when it fits the description, they'll very often be deceptive numbers. They'll report that Rampage is down X amount of percentage, but it'll be the overnight number or the Fast National number versus the full number from the week before. And as we know, the Fast Nationals are a little lower. It's all a game. It's all a game. And it comes from this PR division. And everyone but Cheeseboard Guy got smart to it and felt uncomfortable doing it. But there's still a bevy of puff stories out there. There's still tons of stories that come directly from Legentil and his team, under the condition that you cannot cite them as a source. And what happens is, these media entities play the game because they're thirsty for scoops and content. Because when your lifeblood is scoops and content, you take it any way you can get it. This from someone in the media, and I quote, Legentil is a PR professional that reaches out to wrestling media members to give pro WWE news and spins on things. He reaches out to people but tells them to never use his name or say a WWE spokesperson told him this, to make it sound like it's coming from a more unbiased source and not from Nick Khan's right-hand man. WWE knows that people are starving for information and understands how to strategically send that information out, and all of these jokers are happy to do their bidding. End quote. That's from someone in the media. This is what's happening. This is what Legentil does, and he's very good at it. These puff piece, soft stories take on a very different tone if they were sourced and cited as coming from WWE P.R. Because then you as a media consumer would say, oh, okay, this is coming from WWE P.R. This is a message that the company wants to put out. But when it's unsourced, where does the mind of the media consumer go? Oh, it was some mystery source. Oh, I wonder who's saying that. You know, there's more validity to it if it's unsourced. Legentil understands that. WWE understands that. So they'll give these stories, these soft stories to these outlets who will play the game, because that means more scoops and more stories are coming. And while it's impossible for me to pin specific stories other than the Fast Nationals, which I can confirm are coming from WWE P.R., you can reasonably conclude and figure out which ones might and might not be coming from the company's PR branch. Because that is what's happening, and it's powerful, and it's something that AEW isn't doing. Look, I'm not even saying that it's necessarily all that devious. If the media entities are going to go along with it, why shouldn't they do it? It's on the media entities to put their foot down and say, no, I'm sourcing this. I'm not doing your free PR for you, unpaid, hopefully, and not putting your name on it. That hurts but they don't do that. They're thirsty for the scoops. They're thirsty for the information. They're thirsty to retain the relationship. So they get in the room. So they get in the press box. So they can cheer in the press box. So they can cosplay in the press box. So they can be in the pressers. So they can play reporter. So they play the game. And that's how WWE controls the messaging. Did you know WWE is suing the state of Texas? Did you know that? Probably not, because these are the kinds of stories that slip between the cracks. I even whiffed on this one. And saw it way after the fact. Reported on WrestleNomics. WWE is suing the state of Texas to prevent records, public records, to be provided to Brandon Thurston and WrestleNomics, attendance records and such, to Royal Rumble shows that have been held in the state. And the affidavit states, quote, how damaging the information would be, end quote, to WWE and their business for these records, such as the price of the bids placed by the city of San Antonio, the attendance, and so forth, And they're suing the state of Texas, trying to prevent them to provide that information, public information, to media outlets on the basis it would be damaging to their business. Do you know who wrote that affidavit? Chris Legentil. That might not be a juicy story, and you're not going to see that one pop up in your YouTube algorithm, much like you're not going to see anything about the sexual assault lawsuits against Vince McMahon and WWE. But what I'm sure you will see are more thumbnails of Tony Khan looking like an insane person, talking about how his latest tweet is going to end the company forever. And I'm sure you'll see aggregators tweeting out whatever utter nonsense Eric Bischoff is spewing on his latest useless audio. And I'm sure you'll see plenty of puff piece WWE stories sourced on background direct from WWE PR, although you'll never be told that. And by the way, if you do step out of line and you report something or even tweet something that the company doesn't like, do you know who's throwing you a message? Do you know who's throwing you a quick text, maybe even a phone call? Chris Legentil. And in some cases, I have been told the big man himself, Nick Khan. And what do you do if this is your lifeblood? If you don't want to sever the relationship, if you don't want to annoy these people so that they stop responding to your inquiries, which is their job, because they will freeze you out. I've been told that they will freeze you out if they don't like what you report, if you don't backtrack, they will ignore you. And look, there's some media who have some ethics, who have some personal pride, who, while that may make their jobs harder, they don't mind. That's the cost of doing honest business. But if you don't think those kind of tactics work on the unserious non-professionals in the wrestling media, I don't know what to tell you. And those are things that are definitely happening. I'm behind the curtain. I talk to people. I know what's going on. And now I'm letting all of you know what's going on. And my message to Tony Khan is it's unacceptable that he doesn't have his own network of PR professionals working hard on behalf of his company to combat this avalanche of negative media perception that is nearly impossible to overcome the way the company is currently construed. It'd be hard enough anyway to fight WWE with their 4-decade edge. But when you have a wrestling media full of people of age who grew up on the Attitude Era or grew up on John Cena, forget the Hulkamania era, forget rock and wrestling. Do the math, full-grown adults working in wrestling media. We have 3 generations of them now. Your Gen Xers that grew up with Hogan, your millennials who grew up with the Attitude Era, and your next generation that grew up with John Cena. And they have an emotional attachment to the company. So their coverage is always going to be naturally slanted. They want the company to do well emotionally, let alone it being advantageous for business. These are all impossible to overcome. And it makes it even harder when you're trying to overcome a slick, professional, top of the industry PR operation that Nick Khan, WWE, and TKO have working for them as well. Tony Khan and that Khan family are among the richest people in the United States, in the world. And much like I've spoken about the rest of of Tony Khan's, of AEW's infrastructure being an embarrassment based on the level of wealth that he has and what he could have in place, PR goes along with that as well. Why and how AEW doesn't have a PR arm that is top of the industry, above and beyond even what Nick Khan can put together is beyond my comprehension and understanding. They have the resources to do it. All of these things, the infrastructure in AEW, and in specific, the PR like we're talking about today, to help control media narratives. When you have that level of wealth, there's no excuse. It should have been part of the startup cost of opening up the company. And if it wasn't, you should have learned very quickly how powerful that can be. Because AEW is getting their ass kicked in the battle of public perception. It's a blowout. It is a far bigger gap than even the difference in the ratings or the revenue. And there's really no excuse for it. Tony Khan has the money to fix that. And he should fix it. WWE is co-opting easily co-opted people right under your nose. They don't even need to try this hard with half of them. But on top of every other advantage, they're working hard to co-opt these people as well. And I haven't even mentioned the content creators that WWE has embraced. The people that create reels and TikToks and YouTube positivity accounts, which again, ends up dominating the algorithms. When they invite these people to shows and they create their little reels and sometimes their, waste of time, puff piece interviews with the talent that people like us will mock because it's not content that's of any use to us. And it's basically vapid, useless content. But then what dominates the algorithms? This type of content, WWE. So they are just doing an incredible job cornering the market for every facet of media, from mainstream media to the unserious, unprofessional wrestling media to attempts on the few serious wrestling media that do exist, right down to the quote-unquote content creators, who again are essentially doing free PR for the company. AEW isn't doing any of these things. And it's impossible enough to overcome a 4-decade head start from the industry leader. And behind the curtain, they're not even trying. So if Tony Khan wants to feel like he's not constantly under attack, at some point, he's going to have to go on the offensive. We'll be back. All right, let me tell you guys about the Flagship Patreon. AEW Dynasty coming up. That is this Sunday. That means Instant Reaction Live. Yes, there is going to be an Instant Reaction Live for AEW Dynasty. Yes, the captain, Rich Craich, and the nurse will be back from Looking at the Tree by Sunday. So there will be an Instant Reaction Live this Sunday. For those of you curious, wondering, with Rich on vacation this week, he will be back in time for that show. So there will in fact be an Instant Reaction Live. That means it is time to get on the $10 tier. If you are on the $5 tier, if you are on any of the lower tiers, and you want to hear us review Dynasty, the only place you're going to be able to hear that is on Instant Reaction Live on the $10 tier. You can listen to that show live immediately following Dynasty on Sunday night. We usually get started about 15 to 20 minutes after the pay-per-views end, and we go long. We almost never go less than 2 hours. We sometimes creep up on the 3-hour mark. You get an intensive, deep, comprehensive review, the likes of which we wouldn't be able to do on the Flagship anyway, to the depths that we do it on Instant Reaction Live. If you can't listen live immediately after the pay-per-view, that's okay, because the recorded stream of the live broadcast is always available behind the paywall. But again, because it's a live show, only on that $10 tier. Okay, so you can't be slick and think you're going to save a couple bucks, because it is still paywalled behind the $10 tier, even if you listen to the show later. So that's this weekend on Sunday. As far as the Patreon is concerned, there are other subscription levels. There's the $5 tier, which gives you access to everything we do with the exception of written content and live content. $10 gets you everything. You pay $10, anything we do behind the paywall is going to be unlocked. You don't have to worry about anything. $5, you get virtually everything. You just do not get written content, and you do not get the live content. In fact, it's not even all written content. You still get, when we do written news updates, those are on the $5 tier, but any kind of column or review or anything like that, that would be exclusively on the $10 tier, along with the live content. So $10 gets you everything, $5 gets you almost everything, but did you know that we also have a $1 tier and a free tier? The free tier is interesting because what the free tier will give you is, let's say you're someone who doesn't like to stay subscribed long term, all the time. You like to pick and choose. Maybe you enjoy Instant Reaction Live and you only like to bounce in for that. Maybe you enjoy Rich's seasonal series that he likes to do and you like to see what he's doing before you commit to paying. Maybe you like Jovember to Remember and you only like paying for that. Whatever the case may be, what you can do now, instead of unsubscribing and then resubscribing, what you can do is bounce down to the free tier. And here's where you get an advantage. You will keep getting our emails and you will continue receiving the push notifications and all of that. So you get to keep up with what we're doing behind the paywall. That way it hits your phone. Boom. Oh, okay. That's the content I've been waiting for. I can jump onto the appropriate tier now. So the free tier keeps you connected to the work we're doing behind the paywall. And it keeps you more easily connected to see what we're up to see what we're doing, and whether it's time for you to bounce back up to a paid tier. So if you're one of these people that likes to bounce back and forth, you don't like to stay committed every month, you like to come in just for certain pieces of content, I recommend, instead of unsubscribing, just downgrade to that free tier. And then that way it's much easier just to bounce back up to one of the paid tiers when it's time to do so. We also have a $1 tier. I don't know how many people know about the $1 tier, but that's very similar to the free tier. You're going to get all the push notifications. You're going to get all the emails, but maybe you want to support us monetarily in some way, so you could throw us $1 a month. A lot of people also use that $1 tier if they don't give a shit about our extra content that we have behind the paywall, but they like the idea of supporting us, and that's a cheap, easy way to do so. They throw us the $1. They turn off all the notifications. They're not worried about what we're doing behind the paywall, but they feel like they're able to support us in some way and add a subscription to the ticker. So there's two other ways other than the $5 or $10 tier to keep up. Here's the other thing. Every now and then, we will throw up a free post. Every now and then, we will throw up a post unlocked for $1 subscribers. Okay? Not super often, but maybe once or twice a month. So even if you're on that free tier or that $1 tier, it's not like you're never getting content. We like to throw those tiers a bone now and then. And look, let's face it, it's a marketing tool. Okay? Give you a free piece of content that we're proud of, the beginning of a series, something that we think is really good. And maybe that will entice you to say, hey, I want more of this. I'm going to bump up from that free or $1 tier and get up on a higher tier. But either way, you can park yourself on that free or $1 tier. And look, every now and then, even if you never upgrade, you're still going to get the occasional piece of content. So 4 different ways to subscribe. $10 gets you everything. And by the way, that is by far our most popular tier, the $10 tier. Okay, we currently have a record number of subscribers. We recently hit a record number. Now it fluctuates from day to day, but we recently hit a record number of subscribers. And I can tell you that, I'll give you percentage-wise. There's a rough percentage, okay? Roughly 83% of our subscribers are on that $10 tier. So that should tell you what kind of value you're getting with that $10 tier, okay? Also, current, up to the minute, as I speak, 85% of our total subscribers are paid subscribers, which I did a quick comparison to other wrestling Patreons, and that's well above the average. The other wrestling Patreons, at least the ones that are public, are hovering somewhere around 70 to 75% of their subscribers are paid subscribers. What does that tell you? People who try a paid tier and upgrade from the free tier enjoy what we do, and they stay there. So just a couple of endorsements for what you'll get, both on the $10 tier, which is by far our most popular tier, even though it's the most expensive, and our rate of paid subscribers to free subscribers is the highest percentage that I could find among the major wrestling Patreons. So if you've ever thought about dipping your toes in, if it's something that you've been thinking about, now's a great time to jump in, because you're going to get that Dynasty pay-per-view in a couple of days. And if you do join us on the $10 tier, it's going to unlock everything else. So what you can do from there is you can jump in on November. We're almost 30 Jovember. We're almost 30 episodes deep on Jovember to Remember. Critically acclaimed. Nobody who listens to that thinks it stinks. Okay? You're going to learn something. It's not the same old stories all over again. It's a deeper look and a more niche look at the history of ECW. And there's so many episodes up of that at this point that's enough to keep you busy for a while. The elusive Kurt Angle 5-star match project. Searching for Angle. I now have the first 3 batches of matches up. And if you don't know what that is, it's been a big controversy. Why does Kurt Angle have no 5-star matches? Well, I decided to watch the best of Kurt Angle for myself to see if I agree with Dave Meltzer that Kurt Angle doesn't have any 5-star matches, or to see if I could find an elusive Kurt Angle 5-star match. So I took the top 10 rated Kurt Angle matches on Cage Match and then picked some wildcard matches after speaking to some experts and looking around. And we've got about 13 of the top Kurt Angle matches of all time that I am currently doing written reviews for. And these are comprehensive, deep reviews. These aren't little 3-line reviews. These aren't move recaps, okay? None of that nonsense. I go deep on these reviews, and I'm taking a look at Kurt Angle's work from an analytical perspective, from a super nerdy wrestling analytical perspective, to determine whether or not this guy, in fact, ever had a 5-star match. There's going to be 4 total batches of matches. I've gotten through the first 3, and that will be on the $10 tier as that is written content. That 4th batch will be coming up in about a week or so as we wrap up the Kurt Angle project. Now, does he have any 5-star matches? Did I find any? I don't know. This is a hard sell. I'm doing a commercial. You think I'm going to give that away? Pay the $10, read the articles, and see if I have given any of Kurt Angle's matches the 5-star treatment yet, and see whether or not I disagree with Dave Meltzer. Match of the week. Each week there's a match of the week that goes up behind the paywall. You never know what it's going to be. Sometimes it's completely random. Sometimes it's something that's newsworthy if a wrestler passes away. For instance, this week, the match of the week was Yuji Nagata and Akebono versus Carl Anderson and Giant Bernard. And you don't just get a lazy match link. No, I give you a nice little write-up. Somewhere between, 500 and 2,000 words, depending how long I want to go. Okay, so you get a nice little write-up telling you why I picked the match, breaking down the match. We talk ball in Match of the Week. Not enough people are talking ball these days. Okay? I don't know what happened to talking ball, but it's disappeared. But Match of the Week, I'm going to give you a little history. We're going to talk ball. People jump in the comments and talk about the match. People jump on the Discord. You get your own private room, your own private channel on the Discord as a paying member to discuss Match of the Week. Okay? That none of the freeloaders can come in there and ruin the conversation. Okay? So that's a cool little room where we talk some ball about Match of the Week each week. And Match of the Week is on the $5 tier. So the Thursday Dynamite reviews each and every week. I review Dynamite behind the paywall, also on the $5 tier. Rich does all of his various seasonal series that he likes to do, plus some of his other side projects like the Brett versus Owen series and the series taking a look at the AWF. So I can go on and on. There's so much content back there. Eventually, I got to get back to doing this flagship podcast. But please consider giving the Patreon a try. And the best time is always right around the time of an AEW pay-per-view or another show where we're going to do an instant reaction live, because you really get the full bang for your buck. And people love those instant reaction lives. And don't forget, now that WrestleMania weekend is behind us, And when Rich returns from this little vacation, okay, Flagship Plus is going to return. And that has been an overwhelming success. People love the Flagship Plus. What's Flagship Plus? It's exactly what you're listening to right now. Except they're little midweek flagships. I say little, but they're 90 minutes to 2 hours long most of the time. It's supplemental add-on flagship podcasts available exclusively to you behind that paywall. Topics that we know we're not going to have time to get to on the 3-hour flagship. Topics that normally wouldn't crack a 3-hour flagship. Sometimes off the beaten path. Sometimes smaller promotions that we just don't have time to get to on the flagship. Sometimes just a 45-minute monologue on a topic, which is something we can't do on a flagship. Right? So, Flagship Plus. We're going to get back to that WrestleMania weekend. We were doing plenty of audio, and there just wasn't really, we were covering everything anyway, pretty much every day. There wasn't time to get to it. This week, Rich has been away, but we'll get back on the horse with Flagship Plus. That hasn't gone anywhere. That's been a success. We're going to keep rolling with those. So, plenty of great content back there. Every now and then, we'll bust out a news piece. It's not our bread and butter. It's probably the 5th or 6th thing that we do in terms of, breaking news. But every now and then, Lanza will drop a news bomb on you. And listen, those news reports, again, very substantial. Well written, which is rare in this industry. If I do say so myself, well written. And always chock full and detailed. Because again, this isn't our main gig. If I'm going to report news, I'm not going to give you 2 or 3 lines. Okay? You're going to get some detail. Otherwise, I'm not going to waste your time. So, anyway, that's the, how long did I go here? That is your 13-minute commercial for the Patreon. Nearly 14 minutes. Unbelievable. I am shameless. Anyway, let's preview this AEW Dynasty show. St. Louis, Missouri. Let's see how bad I can botch this. From the Chaffetz Arena. The Chaffetz Arena at St. Louis University. This is where the St. Louis Billikens college basketball team plies their trade. All right. Over 6,000 tickets distributed to this point, so they're going to do a nice little house. Look, as we've talked about a million times, the issues with AEW do not lie in their pay-per-view attendance or their pay-per-view buys. At least not yet. At least not to this point. And we don't seem to be trending that way, as this show is going to have a perfectly acceptable crowd for this size of building. And we'll see about the pay-per-view buys. That's going to be interesting. I talked about that on the Thursday Dynamite review, exclusively on our $5 and $10 tiers at flagshippatreon.com. But this is a AEW pay-per-view that really doesn't have an established tippy-top AEW star positioned in the main event. We've seen Joe in pay-per-view main events before, but with MJF. Swerve has been hovering around the main event scene for some time with the Hangman Page matches and such, but this is his first big opportunity to prove himself in a big-time pay-per-view main event. Now, the semi-main event, kind of the same deal. Will Ospreay, this is his, look, he's been on AEW pay-per-views before, but, down the card. Not a guy counted on the draw. This is a semi-main event level match that's expected to help draw. Will Ospreay versus Bryan Danielson. Big-time wrestling nerd. People who love wrestling. This is a dream match. And that's how they're selling this thing. And as I expressed on the Dynamite review, I was a little surprised and baffled, quite honestly, that Danielson wasn't involved in the big angle at the end of Dynamite when the Don Callis family came down and attacked Claudio, and Ospreay didn't want nothing to do with that. Mox comes down and makes the save. Mox, of course, is wrestling Will Hobbs on next week's Dynamite after the pay-per-view. No Danielson. So as Ospreay is walking up the ramp, all disappointed at what his stablemates are doing, showing visible displeasure and not wanting to participate, that would have been a perfect opportunity to send Bryan Danielson out there to have those guys go face-to-face on the ramp or up on the stage, while Claudio and Mox are eyeballing the rest of the crew down in the ring like we did see on the show. But they didn't opt for that. Now, I've had some people already respond to the Dynamite review saying, oh, well, Danielson was selling the beating from Collision. All right, I get that. You also don't have to do a beating on Collision that necessitates him to sell for Dynamite when Dynamite is your last chance to sell a match on your A show before a pay-per-view. No one's making you do an angle where the guy has to sell and not show up on Dynamite. And if that's the case, if he's selling the beating from last week's Collision, why is it that he was too beaten to appear on Dynamite, but 2 days from now on Collision, he could participate in a wild bunkhouse match? He'll be healthy enough for the bunkhouse match, but he had to sell 2 days earlier and not even appear on Dynamite, even though it wasn't even booked for a match. I don't know. It seems to me Danielson couldn't appear this Wednesday for whatever reason, and instead of telling him to get his ass to work because we have an angle to shoot to sell a pay-per-view 4 days later, they wrote him out for a couple days and they're going to bring him back on Collision. Is it a huge deal? No. Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Maybe. But I just feel like sometimes AEW gets away from promoting and pushing their most important matches and putting their best foot forward in doing so. Ospreay and Danielson should have had some kind of face-to-face. They should have had some kind of confrontation. They should have had some kind of angle on this week's Dynamite, which millions of people are ultimately going to see when you add in whatever they do on the rating. Whatever, 800,000 people like they do every week, plus however many hundreds of thousand people watch on DVR. The most eyeballs are going to be on Dynamite. That's where your most important go-home angle should be, like they did for Joe and Swerve a few minutes later. And I understand we're having the bunkhouse match on Collision, and that'll help build towards the Danielson-Ospreay thing, and maybe they'll have a confrontation there. But again, that's Collision that does half the viewership. And I understand real life gets in the way, things happen. I don't know. I just feel like it was an odd omission to not have Danielson out there when you were doing a big angle between the Callis family and the Blackpool Combat Club anyway. As far as the main event, I'll echo some of the thoughts I had behind the paywall. It looks like Swerve is going to win. All indications are that he's going to win. All the insiders I talk to feel like he's going to win. Everyone that's in the know says the plan was for him to win. It doesn't mean that it's locked in. I'm not giving you a spoiler. But he'd certainly be the favorite going in. And the go-home angle, or what we think is the go-home angle, maybe they'll do something on Rampage or Collision, I don't know. With Swerve diving on the security guards, but ultimately Joe standing tall, holding up the title in the end. If this is classic pro wrestling booking, that's an indication that Joe's losing that title on Sunday. And then the big question is Swerve Strickland ready to be the AEW champion, which is a hot topic of debate among AEW fans. My stance has been clear. If you listen to my Dynamite reviews, I feel like Swerve, if you're going to tell this story properly, when he does win the AEW title, and I feel like he will at some point, I feel like that's a virtual lock. He's going to be the champion. I feel like he should win it from Hangman Page, not Samoa Joe. The story has been that Hangman Page has completely lost his mind over Swerve, over losing to Swerve, over Swerve breaking into his house, and is hellbent, and has stated that his goal is to prevent Swerve Strickland from ever achieving the one thing he wants to achieve more than anything else, and that's being AEW World Champion. So I feel like, to tell this story properly, it would make the most sense for a heel Hangman Page to eventually become AEW World Champion, and for Swerve to beat Hangman for the title directly, which would put that story to bed. But if he beats Joe, that's out the window. Could you have Hangman cost Swerve the match? Hangman has been conspicuous by his absence. Think he had a baby or whatever, that's fine. Congrats on that. But they haven't even really been mentioning him, and is that a little dubious? I don't know if you want to do that kind of finish at the end of a pay-per-view. It would fit the story. I think there's a reasonable expectation with AEW that you're going to get good, clean finishes for the most part. That doesn't mean that they can't do a fuck finish. They've done them before. So, I don't know. It's a possibility. I don't buy it. I just think that Swerve is going to win. Is he ready to carry the ball and be the top guy in this company and be a drawing world champion? I don't know. I don't know. Right this second, my gut tells me no. If he wins, will he catch fire? Because that's a thing that happens. Maybe. Very possible. I mean, let's face it, Samoa Joe has been a good world champion from a performance standpoint. You're not going to find many better promos in pro wrestling than Samoa Joe. His bell-to-bell has been way better than anybody in, let's say, 2016 would have thought it would have been by 2024. Because Joe being washed up has been something that's been talked about for almost a decade now. At least 6, 7, 8 years. And he had some rough years there and some rough times. And it's been legitimate talk. There's been times where, it's like, hey, Joe can still talk and Joe still has presence but in the ring. But he's had a resurgence in the ring. So he's been a fine champion from that standpoint. Is he a big-time needle mover? He's not. Does he do monster quarter hours? He doesn't. He does okay when positioned properly on pay-per-views. That could be more of a company thing. We'll find out with this show. Because this show, Samoa Joe's the main event. And he's not in there with a bigger star. He's in there with another guy who's trying to prove himself for the first time in an important main event spot in a pay-per-view. So we'll see. If Dynasty doesn't do the kind of numbers that AEW is accustomed to, and we see a big drop, you got to point to the main event. People aren't wrapped up in Swerve winning the world title. People aren't wrapped up in Samoa Joe defending the world title. A strong semi-main event dream match is not enough to overcompensate for that. But we'll see. I think the pay-per-view is going to do well, despite a messy build in spots. And if Swerve wins, we find out. Then we pay a little closer attention to the quarters. And he gets scrutinized the way all top guys do. And that's only fair. Because that's the responsibility that comes with being the world champion and being the top guy. Young Bucks versus FTR in a ladder match. Look, the tournament stunk. It was a big old bomb. It got us to where we thought we were going to get, though. The Young Bucks versus FTR for these tag team titles. And what is this, their fourth match? This time they're going to do it with ladders. I don't know. I mean, their matches have been underwhelming to some degree, just about all of them. They were all good matches, but I don't know if when people were anticipating the Young Bucks versus FTR bouts before FTR entered the company or when they first entered the company, we thought we were going to get great all-time matches. They haven't been. You get a ladder into the mix, we'll see. A lot of times that's an easy cheat code for big impressive spots and a match that gets over big with a crowd. So I don't think the match will... Look, I'm kind of over ladder matches. You guys know that. Longtime listeners know that. But I think for a lot of people, the ladder is going to make this a more interesting match than it would have been without the ladder. I think the Bucks are finding their groove with this new gimmick. I think Okada's been fantastic. We'll talk about him in a second. In fact, why don't we just talk about Okada now? Okada versus Pac for the Continental title. What a perfect defense here for Okada because these two guys can go out there. I think everybody's wrapped up in Will Ospreay versus Bryan Danielson, and for good reason. These guys can steal the show if they have good chemistry. Let's not forget that this is Kaz Okada, who was arguably the best wrestler in the world for a number of years. And it's Pac, who we all know is great. Look, I don't know how the chemistry is going to be. If you want to get deep in the weeds, Okada, of course, trained in the Toryumon system. Pac, of course, is, I don't think I have to consult Iron Mike Spears and Case Low on this one. He's the most decorated foreigner in Dragon Gate history, the most decorated and respected foreigner. I think I'm comfortable saying that. So Pac has a lot of experience working with the Toryumon style. Now, Okada's not a full-on Toryumon wrestler, we know that, but he has elements of it. You can still see it in a lot of what he does, in his base skills and his base style. And I'm curious if they'll work some of that into this. But if they have good chemistry, look, depending on the kind of match that Will and Brian decide to have, I could see Okada and Pac knocking on the door for match of the night. Why not? And oh, by the way, the Young Bucks are in a fucking ladder match. And don't think Samoa Joe and Swerve aren't going to go out there and try to steal the show, even if we get a wonky finish. So, from that standpoint, this is going to be a typical AEW pay-per-view where you have a bunch of great matches to sink your teeth into. There's no doubt about that. Maybe they all won't hit, but a lot of them will. And I expect Okada to retain. I don't think he's losing it here to Pac unless they're doing like a 3-match series, which, look, I'd have no problem with that. But I don't think it's time for Okada to lose yet. In fact, I wouldn't have Okada lose at minimum until the finals of the Continental Classic, which he no doubt will be a part of. I don't like the fantasy book. Fantasy booking alert. Here comes the nerd. But here's what I would do. I'd have him go unbeaten to the Continental Classic. I'd put him in that motherfucker. I would push it as, this is a man who has won G1s. He's a master of these types of table tournaments. And I'd have him run the table in his block while pushing that narrative. Send him to the final. And then if you want to beat him there and put somebody over, go for it. That'd be a great spot to do it. Because at that point, Okada would have all these wins racked up. Eddie Kingston, Pac, whoever he beats in between now and the tournament, plus whoever he beats in his tournament block. They don't call them blocks in AEW, right? They call them something else. Leagues. They call it, what did they call, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. So then you can use that as an opportunity to put somebody over in the final, because not only are they winning the Continental Classic and taking home that title and becoming a tournament winner, right? They're beating the previously unbeaten Okada, who has been pushed as this tournament master. So that would be a good spot for Okada to eat his first L. Not on this show against Pac before he has even, sunk his teeth into his Continental title reign. I wouldn't do it here. But if they do it here, even though I feel like that's a mistake for Okada's trajectory, right? I feel like what we'll get out of that is at least a rematch and maybe a series of matches between the two, which that's a nice pillow, right? That's a nice downside to beating Okada too soon. But I don't think they will. And Okada has been handled perfectly. Perfectly. And when it comes to Okada and Ospreay and Sasha, or Mercedes, whatever the hell her name is, like, I really feel like, and I've kind of stayed away from this topic, but I feel like hyper-analyzing their quarter hours right now is a little bit silly. It really is. As long as their quarter hours are holding up, as long as they pop a quarter hour now and then, right? As long as they're doing well and coming across well on television, to which we could debate on all three. I think Okada's come across very well. I think Will Ospreay's come across like the future top star of the company. And I think Mercedes, that's been hit or miss, to say the least. And this will be a good transition into talking about some of the women's matches on the show. But sometimes these things take time. It doesn't mean these people aren't working out. Don't listen to those goofy narratives like, the kind of people I talked about in the first segment of the show, who are out there running a grift, telling people what they want to hear. The bloodline didn't catch on for like 2.5 years. Was not a ratings mover at all until Sami Zayn got hot and ignited that thing. And then what happened? Then Cody Rhodes got in the mix. And then it was just, super hot. Critically acclaimed all along the way, the Bloodline. A little over-acclaimed if you ask me, but critically acclaimed. Fans liked it. Critics liked it. Wasn't doing anything special in the ratings until Sami Zayn got added to the mix. And that was accidental. Then it took off. Sometimes, the point here is sometimes these things take time. My point isn't that they should go hire Sami Zayn. Although I think that'd be an excellent hire. My point here is sometimes it takes time for something to really take off. And in the case of all three of these people who came in on the big money contracts, they're always going to be compared to each other. This talking point's always going to exist for all three, and we'll see what happens. These types of conversations. Oh, Okada was in a quarter hour that only grew 8,000 viewers. What a, maybe in a year, these kinds of conversations are going to look really silly. We don't know that. I think Okada and Ospreay are doing great. Mercedes, as we transition to the two women's matches on the show, Julia Hart versus Willow Nightingale. Mercedes awaits the winner at the next pay-per-view. The longer it takes for Mercedes to wrestle, the more you feel her star power slowly erode. I know I'm not the only one feeling that. Because she's doing things that are outside of her strength, which is wrestling. These pre-tape segments, like the terrible one where she got attacked in the dark, which was just total amateur hour. Her promos, which have been very hit or miss, and I think I'm one of the kinder critics on her promos. I think they've been hit or miss. Some people think she's just been terrible. Now, I'm coming from a position where I didn't think she was good at promos to begin with, and I feared that she would struggle a bit. So I think in a couple examples, she's over-delivered in a weird way, while some of her other segments have been dreadful. I think of the three big signings. If you do want to be impatient and not follow my advice from before, she would have to be the most disappointing because, she comes in with the biggest fan base of established American television watching fans, and they haven't seemed to follow her in great numbers. Right? We know they sold out Battle in the Valley almost instantly when she was announced. Smaller building, but still. We all saw the New Japan World numbers that were reported for her first couple of New Japan. So we know that she has moved business to some degree outside of WWE. So could it be a situation where the Sasha fans have gotten non-WWE Sasha out of their system and they're not as jacked up about her now because they've seen it already? The novelty is worn off of her being outside of that company. I don't know. Or is it a situation where, again, we just have to be a little patient? Let her wrestle. Let her sink her teeth into something that, maybe people aren't super compelled about a Willow Nightingale match. I don't know. But the longer this takes, and now we have to somehow get through another pay-per-view cycle of Sasha Banks non-wrestling segments before we get her in the ring. And, a lot of them haven't been great. And people are getting impatient, and the critics are swarming. So I expect Willow to win. The whole idea now is Mercedes feels like Julia Hart attacked her because the lights went out. But, as she said in the promo, maybe it's someone who wants me to think it's Julia Hart. And she still has this distrust of Willow. All because a few weeks ago she turned around and Willow was holding that chair. Because Willow hasn't given her any other reason to distrust her other than that one shot where Willow was still holding that chair. And this week it was Sasha running in with the chair and then throwing it down as soon as the coast was clear to show Willow, hey, I'm not coming for you. But that seems to be the match they're building to, not Sasha and Julia. right? But I guess Julia will still be part of this in some way because, they have to sell that maybe it was her who attacked with the lights off. But man, we gotta get Sasha in that ring, and we have to have her wrestling on TV before we can fairly assess whether she's a potential needle mover for this company. And also see how her first pay-per-view does from a buy rate standpoint that she wrestles on. Because I'm sure her match will be positioned very high up the card. I don't think Sasha Banks, Willow Nightingale will be a pay-per-view main event. Could it be positioned as one of the drawing matches on a pay-per-view? Yeah, absolutely. It's Mercedes. Yes. Paying her a lot of money. It's like a baseball team that signs a big free agent, right? To a 5-year contract for $25 million a year. If that guy's hitting 180 through April, you're not going to bench him. You got to justify the cost. In fact, if that guy completely falls off a cliff in year 4 of the contract, you still got to play him to justify the cost. That's where we are with some of these people that Tony has signed. And I'm not suggesting any of them are batting 180. But Sasha, I don't know. She's hitting about 250 with a lot of slap singles the other way. I mean, she's not exactly hitting home runs. Not the way the other two are. Timeless Tony versus Thunder Rosa. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say because I don't give a shit about Timeless Tony. I think it stinks. And I'm not coming off of that. I've got no reason to come off of it. And I hate that the women's title is bogged down with this awful gimmick. I would be able to tolerate this much more if Tony was down the card. And it's so silly because now Mercedes Moné, is all wrapped up in the TBS title universe, the secondary title, instead of the world title. Because, this Timeless Tony nonsense with Mariah May and Luthor is dominating the world title, and that's a mess. Mercedes Moné should be in the world title picture. From the jump. Not the secondary title picture, fucking around with Julia Hart. So from that standpoint, it's all a mess. And maybe the goal here is to get to Mercedes versus Timeless Tony. I don't know. But if that was the case, then just do it. Why wait around? Why have her fuck around with the secondary title first? This just doesn't make any sense to me. Roderick Strong versus Kyle O'Reilly. So we knew at some point the unified, the Undisputed Kingdom was going to jump Kyle O'Reilly, and they did this past weekend on one of the 19 shows AEW had. I think it was Collision. And they're going to have their match right here and now. Now, here's the thing, and I didn't mention this match before. And the reason I didn't is I am not convinced that Kyle O'Reilly is the Kyle O'Reilly that we became accustomed to before he broke his neck or whatever that injury was. If he is, we know that Roderick Strong could still go. And if these guys just go out there and have a match without the Kingdom being involved and other such assorted nonsense, this is another match that is a sneaky match of the night contender. Now, it's not going to get the time some of these other matches get. But the thing is, I don't know where Kyle O'Reilly is right now in his return physically. And he may never be the same guy again. But if he could channel that, and if he is that, can he get in there with Roderick Strong and have one of the best matches of the night? Absolutely. And these guys are going to want to steal the show. But you look at Kyle, he had a match with Brian Keith that was fine, and then he had a very, very short match with JD Drake. Neither of those matches were great showcases to show whether Kyle O'Reilly can be the guy, who really peaked a few years ago. Remember how great he was in New Japan? Especially when Red Dragon were there, and then those guys, he had the match with Shibata and around 2016, 2017, let alone all the other great shit he's done in his career. Now, I don't know if that guy exists anymore. And if he doesn't, and if he's something else now, that's okay after what he's been through. I'm not suggesting we throw him in the trash. But if he could ever get back to being that guy, this could be a phenomenal match. It really could. What do we got left? Oh, Hook versus Chris Jericho. I'm not as down on this as everybody else is. I don't know. I've never been afraid to have unpopular opinions. You guys know that. I've never been part of this Chris Jericho bashing party. I don't know. I don't get it. I think he's fine, and he's an important presence. I still say, if you look at the 5-year history of this company, and some of you can puke in your mouths all you want, I think he's the MVP of the company. It's either him or Mox. There's really no other option. If you go with Mox, I'm not going to die on that hill. I'm not going to fight you. But there's a solid argument Chris Jericho is the MVP of this promotion in its first 5 years. He certainly was for the first year. I don't know if they're here without Jericho. There's Cody. There's the Elite, of course. There's Omega. There's Hangman. There's Mox, right? You really can't take any of these people. But I really don't think you take Jericho away that first year either. He's very important in establishing that title. The most well-known quantity on the roster. And everything he does hasn't hit. He's got plenty of misses. But this Hook storyline hasn't bothered me the way it's bothered a lot of other people. I don't know. I have to see it play out. I hate to be let it play out guy. But, Hook needs a boost. There's no question. I've talked at length about all the issues with Hook. He just doesn't come off authentic. He doesn't come off nearly as authentic as he used to before he was speaking, when he was more mysterious. Right? That came off authentic. When he was just this silent fucking killer who dropped people on their heads. Now he comes across forced, not as authentic. I don't buy him. And I think that's coming across. He's not as over with the audience anymore either. And so I think that same feeling is coming across with a lot of the audience. And if people hate Chris Jericho and are tired of Chris Jericho as much as I'm told that they are, and that could be true, then Hook going over this guy in a program should theoretically help Hook. But the thing with Jericho is he gets beat like a drum and people beat him all the time, right? To where I don't know what it's worth anymore because he loses too much. If you really want to put me in the insane asylum, I think Chris Jericho should win more. I think he loses too much. To where beating him doesn't hold as much value as it used to. But then what happens is the person who goes over Jericho gets lost in the booking for a month. Jericho's right back on TV, and then people blame Jericho for that. Instead of blaming who you should be blaming, Tony Khan. So maybe Hook gives this guy, drops him on his head and beats him clean in the middle. And they stretcher him out and everything else. But then if Hook's not on TV for 6 weeks, and Chris Jericho comes back to TV and then does whatever his next program is, that's not Chris Jericho's fault. That Hook didn't get properly over from stretchering Chris Jericho. That's the fault of the follow-up booking. And I feel like there's some Jericho derangement syndrome that gets in people's way when it comes to that. Due to whatever outside reasons you don't like the guy, which go right ahead. I don't care about any of that. That's your business. You can hate whoever you want to hate for outside. But I'm just analyzing the pro wrestling aspect of this. That's what I do. And I thought the angle with Taz was strong. But again, Hook didn't quite come off authentic. When he cornered Jericho and had him collared in the corner and was threatening him. There's just, I don't buy the rich Long Island kid as some super cool street tough. I have trouble with it. He's not convincing in the role. Again, go watch Taz tapes from 1996 and compare that to Hook if you want to see someone who was convincing in getting a gimmick over and someone who's struggling in getting authenticity over. I mean, the comp is right there. It's his old man. Admittedly a high bar, but this is the big time. Adam Copeland, Eddie Kingston, and Mark Briscoe versus the House of Black. I've seen some people criticize this match. What's this random 6-man tag doing? Look, I like shit like this. I think AEW needs more of this. I think AEW needs more. Now, I was going to use the word random. That's the wrong word to use because there's obviously a story behind this match. This isn't just 6 guys having a match, okay? But I think AEW could use more of this and even some just random match. Look, there's 9 matches on this show. Okay? If Tony did what people accuse Tony of doing, but what Tony really never does, if that makes any sense. And Tony threw on a work rate special. He did, I don't fucking know, Commander versus Action Andretti. I pull whatever names you want to pull. Castagnoli's not on the card. Claudio Castagnoli versus fucking Pentagon. Pick your names. Some match with 2 guys who have no story, and their job is to go out there and have the best 12-minute match possible on the pay-per-view. I wish Tony would do those things. Those are things people say Tony does, but he doesn't really do. I think the pay-per-views could use more of that. And more matches like this, where we get a 6-man. This is like reminiscent of like 1992 WCW. 3 baby faces coming together to face a common enemy in a hot 6-man tag. I love shit like this. So I see people criticizing this, and, you know, I understand because maybe they're not used to matches like this, especially on a pay-per-view, but I like it. I don't think every pay-per-view match has to be some long-built singles rivalry that culminates at the pay-per-view. You need that to sell your show. And I'm not saying I don't want those things, but you could mix in more of this. And again, this isn't even random. This is 3 guys that all have a grudge against the house. But this is an interesting way of getting those 3 guys in the mix against the house. Do a 6-man tag. So that's what we have. We have 9 matches announced. It looks like a really strong show on paper. You have a couple matches where, you know, depending where O'Reilly is with his health, depending what Hook Jericho ends up looking like, because Jericho has his days where he stinks. There's no doubt about it. And it ain't like Hook's going to carry him. Depending how the women's matches, you know, because anything with Timeless Tony is a threat to be awful. But there's some matches here that, you know, Will Ospreay, Bryan Danielson, the floor is pretty great, right? Wouldn't we all be stunned if that wasn't like, to use stars, like 4-star floor, right? This is the kind of match where if it comes in 3.5, it's a, you know, we're stunned. Okada, Pac, unless they just have the worst chemistry of all time. You know, the Bucks in a ladder match. It'll be an entertaining car crash at minimum. Main event should have some heat and be a lot of fun. This should be a good show. We'll see if it's a great show. Do I think it's a lock to be a great show? I don't. Too many questions, even if they're minor. But it should be a good show at minimum. And I do think it'll do good business. I think AEW still has the trust of the pay-per-view consumer because their pay-per-views are always great. And that's another interesting thing to look at. Why does AEW draw so well both at the gate and on pay-per-view when it comes time for their pay-per-views, but they struggle so badly to sell tickets to their rank and file shows? Could it be that it's because all the pay-per-views are typically great? And there's consumer trust because you know you're going to get a great show, more than likely? I mean, you can't discount that. You can't discount that. We'll be back with some New Japan. All right, you Shin Nihon freaks. As promised, little New Japan. And we're going to go deep on New Japan. We're going to talk about this Windy City Riot show in extreme detail. And then we're going to take a look at all of the big matches coming up on the next New Japan tour. We have a new IWGP Heavyweight Champion. That would be Jon Moxley. And then when we're done diving deep on the New Japan, we're going to take a look at some Green Ring. So for you Green Ring freaks, we're going to take a voyage to Pro Wrestling Noah. I got to tell you, I like what I'm seeing out of Noah lately. Things change fast in pro wrestling. That promotion was dry as a bone last year. Just dreary. No energy. All the shows in that beautiful 1080p or whatever the fuck it is on whatever that service is called. Wrestle World. What the hell's the service called? The one with DDT and Noah and all the other gimmicks. Beautiful picture for just these dreary Noah buildings and no life, no energy shows. That hasn't been the case lately. Remember last year when All Japan was coming off just a dreadful, boring, dry as a bone year in 2022, and then came out of the gates hard at the start of 2023, and they became one of the must-watch promotions of the year. Last year it was all about All Japan and CMLL, right? In terms of promotions that, if you're a deep pro wrestling dork, the likes of which are listening to the third hour of this podcast, you had to be locked into some All Japan last year. Yuma Aoyagi and the gang, right? And CMLL. Could Noah be the company? I know we're in April, but it's been a few shows now. You know, we're taking this back to, it might have been hard for us to trust Noah, but they're doing some nice things. And I'm not going to blow the end of the segment. You're going to have to wait for that. We're going to do New Japan first. So all you Shin Nihon freaks who are here for the New Japan review, and you don't really care about Noah, maybe stick around for the last 10, 15 minutes of this. I'll catch you up on what is going on in Noah and why I think they're a much more interesting promotion in 2024 than they were in 2023. Anyway, let's dig into this Windy City Riot, Wintrust Arena, Chicago, Illinois. We have ourselves an old-fashioned attendance controversy. WrestleTix is saying 5,238 tickets distributed. And New Japan is reporting 6,028 as the attendance. So that's about an 800 fan difference, or an 800 ticket difference, I should say. So I will read you what WrestleTix had to say about that. Remember, they use, one of these computer scripts on the computer that's, way over my head. Some kind of computer genius, this guy over here. And remember, and he tracks tickets distributed, not necessarily sold. He just tells you how many tickets are out based on what's left on the maps and all that shit. So, as I desperately scroll his... okay, here we go. So, here's what he had to say about the 800 ticket difference, 790 ticket difference between what he had and what New Japan reported. And I quote, NJPW's website has an attendance of 6,028. Their website has been pretty reliable in the past. But after the seats came back on the map last night in the upper deck, and reviewing my pictures, I'm pretty confident in my number, end quote. Now, WrestleTix does a great job. And I was following this ticket situation because either way, whether they broke 5,000, whether they broke 6,000, this is a huge number for New. This is one of their biggest numbers ever in America. So this show was a massive success either way. And I was tracking this. And of course I have hiccups as soon as I start doing the show. It's unbelievable. I just had some beautiful burrata cheese with a little oregano and roasted red pepper slices. Little post-dinner meal. Had a nice steak before that, but I finally was able to find some burrata cheese here in Texas. You know, that's the, for you non-Italians out there, it's the nice mozzarella, right? And it's like a ball of mozzarella, and it's encasing inside more shredded mozzarella with like a cream, with like a creamy mozzarella, shredded mozzarella filling. It's just fucking delicious, okay? I can't get that shit out here. My grocery store finally had it. I couldn't wait to tear into it. Little oregano, little crushed red pepper, just a little. Just a little. You don't want to overwhelm this with the spice. Some roasted red pepper strips, right? My vinegar peppers I made a couple weeks ago, not quite ready. Tasted them tonight. I would have had those. Washing it down with a little Coke Z. I watched the end of the Giants Diamondbacks game. Okay? Enjoying my little cheese treat here. Washed it down with a little Coke Z. And now I've got these hiccups. And I'm trying to talk my way through this until I feel the hiccups subside. So I'm not struggling through this fucking New Japan review. You know what I'm saying? I think we're good. Anyway, it's a great number either way. And I think what could have happened here, I don't, option A is New Japan is fudging the numbers. And the way that their business has been going since the pandemic, would any of us be shocked? If they're fluffing them a little, if there's a little fluffing involved, I don't think any of us would be shocked, right? That's pro wrestling. They haven't been known to do that in many, many years. I think it has something to do with being publicly traded over the last decade or so. But if they're not fudging numbers, what it could also be is they may have put out a number of comps that didn't show up. Because it is mysterious that they took away the availability of a lot of those upper deck seats a couple days before the show, because I was following this pretty closely on WrestleTix. And he does a great job tracking that kind of stuff. And then those seats mysteriously reappeared the day of the show. Yeah, who knows? Maybe they had some comps out, that aren't accounted for on the map with the fucking script that the computer guy uses. So I don't know. Either number you go with, this is one of the biggest attendances and likely one of the biggest gates that New Japan has ever done in the United States. I mean, this is a big time gate for them. So the show did very well, and you have to attribute that to Jon Moxley versus Tetsuya Naito for the title. And I think, you got to sprinkle a little credit to Nick Nemeth, Matt Riddle, and Mustafa Ali. Now, Mustafa Ali from Chicago was a big indie star in Chicago before he signed with WWE. So maybe Ali a little more than the other two, but 3 ex-WWE names. There's some value there with Riddle. There's some, value there with Nemeth. I think those are your two primary factors to explain this number. And they had balls running Wintrust, but they knew they could. They knew. They didn't put 2,000 people in this place, which would have been a little embarrassing. They put between 5,000 and 6,000 people in this building, and it looked good. And it sounded good. This was a hot crowd. I really thought the crowd was great and lifted what I didn't think was a very good show. I didn't think it was a bad show, but I didn't like this show. It's not a show I'm going to recommend to you if you haven't seen it. But the crowd was really hot, and the crowd did elevate a lot of the matches. Now, they're going to be in Ontario, California for the Resurgence event. And that's going to happen right at, in the middle of the Best of the Super Juniors. Actually, the very same day that Best of the Super Juniors tour opens in Japan, in Chiba, on May 11th is the Resurgence show. So you're not going to get anybody who's booked for Best of the Super Juniors on that Resurgence show. And we have the card. And they already have... Well, they had 1,955 tickets out. So they're over 2,000 at this point, because I believe that number was from several days ago. And now, now that we have some matches, they had almost 2,000 tickets out before anyone even knew what was going to be on the show. We have been talking about how well this show had been moving tickets since before Windy City Riot. Now, they're only set up for a little over 3,000 fans. They have a chance to fill it up. And I don't know how many more seats are in that little Toyota Center, whatever it's called. Toyota Center is the building in Houston. Whatever, it's called the Toyota something. Toyota Arena. I don't know what that little place holds. Let's pull that up. So Toyota Arena, Ontario, California. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is, they play hockey in this place. This holds 11,000 fans. So who plays in this thing? I'm not a big hockey guy. No, it looks like some minor league hockey teams and whatnot. But they've had preseason basketball there, according to Wikipedia. Drew over 10,000 for a Laker game. So Lakers play their preseason game. Well, they play some preseason games there. So, listen, if this sells the 3,000 allotted tickets, they obviously have a lot of room to push some more. And with Moxley as the champion, now look, is Ren Narita a big-time drawing opponent? No. But this show is also going to do well as New Japan continues to do very well in America this year. We have 6 matches so far. Adrian Quest versus Matt Vandegrift. Matt Vandegrift, the latest New Japan Strong guy who works all these dark matches and undercards, but they don't seem to do anything with him. Fred Rosser and Tom Lawlor versus the West Coast Wrecking Crew. We'll talk about the angle that set that up. David Finlay and Kenta versus Tetsuya Naito and Yota Tsuji. So we're bringing LIJ with the big guns to Ontario, California, which should help, with Naito teaming with Tsuji. Stephanie Vakir defends the title against Alex Windsor. That's another title match that was set up at Windy City Riot. Eddie Kingston versus Gabe Kidd for the strong openweight title. No rope, last man standing. These two have been feuding in New Japan for, going back to last year. We saw the big schmaz on the Windy City Riot show, so now, there's a good chance Kidd wins the title there. And then Moxley defends against, it's not Ren, it's Shota Umino no, okay. This is the Shota Umino match if Jon Moxley is successful against Ren Narita, which we all know he's going to be. But yeah, I had that wrong. It's the Shota Umino title shot in Ontario, California, which, let's be honest, it's going to be Moxley. Unless he gets injured, he's getting past Ren Narita. And we'll talk about some of the other big matches coming up in New Japan on the Dantaku Tour, including Moxley versus Ren Narita in Fukuoka. I believe on night 2. Yeah, night 2 in Fukuoka. But we'll get to all that after we talk about Windy City Riot. But he's facing the Shooter in Ontario, which is, it's smarter to do it that way because there's a little more cachet with the Shooter among the American fans, since that's kind of been, Moxley attached himself to Shooter very early on when he was a young boy and all that. And we've seen Shooter in AEW from time to time. So I think it's smarter to do the Ren Narita match first in Japan and then do the Umino match later on in the United States, which is the way they're doing it. So anyway, let's get into Windy City Riot. Man, this show is an 8.13 on Cage Match. I don't get it. I haven't opened up this page yet. I'm looking at some of the matches. I don't disagree wildly with a lot of these ratings. But, and I guess there were more good matches on the show than I had in my mind. But I still, for whatever reason, I didn't really enjoy this show very much. I didn't think it was a bad show. But I certainly didn't think it was a show that, I'd give an 8 out of 10. But, I don't know. Maybe when I go through it, I'll change my mind. So we'll start at the top. I did not watch, by the way, the pre-show, which they called the buy-in. I don't know. Wasn't that Tony Khan's old gimmick? He goes with 0 hour now, I guess. So it was Matt Vandegrift over Zane J. I'm not familiar with Zane J. Vandegrift is, seems to work all of these shows. And then it was Alex Windsor and Trisha Dora over Mina Shirakawa and Viva Van. I didn't watch either one of these matches, but Alex Windsor did come out after the Stephanie Vakir successful title defense later on the show and made the challenge for the match that she's going to get at Resurgence. So, that was the deal there. And they gave her a big win on the pre-show, I guess, to set that up. Main show opened with Ren Narita versus Minoru Suzuki, and Ren Narita won. And, I'm watching this match, and I'm not thinking much about it. Ren Narita, obviously in House of Torture now, and they haven't really been doing much with him back in Japan. And, in my non-analytical brain in that moment, I'm thinking, all right, we're going to get the Gotch-style pile driver in the 1-2-3. Minoru Suzuki, very popular in the United States, as everybody knows. But Ren Narita wins. And then when I thought about it, it made a ton of sense. Number one, Minoru Suzuki just doesn't need to win anymore. And I thought it was refreshing that one of the young guys here, one of the new, musketeers of whatever the Rira era, whatever the hell they call it, rerun era, whatever, Riewa era, whatever the fuck. It's time for those guys to beat people like Minoru. Minoru Suzuki's never getting pushed again. So, it made a ton of sense. And obviously, along with Despy, these two guys were the Never Openweight Trios champions last year and had a nice little reign before Ren Narita turned heel. So there was, a storyline reason for the match as well. And they did work it in a heated way. And I watched this not knowing that Ren Narita came out and challenged and attacked Jon Moxley later. So then the win even made more sense from that standpoint. And it was refreshing to see. So again, I preach patience with the booking with some of these guys. And now we're going to see a couple of these young guys get their first IWG World title shots against Jon Moxley. One against the man who attacked him in the post-match. And I guess I'm jumping ahead to the main event. And I'll just talk about the main event next. We don't have to go in order. And then the second against the guy who Moxley's been aligned with in storyline from literally day one in New Japan 5 years ago. And I cannot believe it's been 5 years. Man, the pandemic feels like at the same time that it was yesterday and 75 years ago. And I don't know how that's possible. But the pandemic really feels like it was yesterday and also another lifetime ago. And then you find out Jon Moxley's been in New Japan 5 years, which is before the pandemic. And that Shota Umino was a young boy 5 years ago, when it feels like he just stopped being a young boy 6 months ago. It's just, the old time is a flat circle. None of it makes sense. The pandemic made it even make less sense. There's still people running around with masks, so that confuses me. So anyway, Narita wins, and it's about time, and it is the right time for finishes like that to happen. And look, there wasn't much. I think Suzuki's cooked. I've been saying that since that big American indie run that he had, where I don't think he looked good, and he really just played the hits, and that's all he has to do. He has to come out to the song. You have to let people sing Kaze ni Nare, and he has to play the hits in the match. That's all. But I do think that he's cooked at this point. He even goofed around at Bloodsport WrestleMania weekend. Stephanie Vakir successfully defended the Strong title. As I closed the stupid notes app on my phone. This is why I write everything down. If I write it down with a pen and paper, it's in front of me. I can't accidentally close an app. Okay? Frustrates me. But sometimes I'm in front of the TV watching this shit, and the notebook's like downstairs. I don't want to go up and down the stairs. So, I'll just grab my phone and I'll use the phone, the gimmick, the thing I put the fucking grocery list on the phone, the notebook gimmick. But then I'm fumbling around with the thing, trying to do some audio, and I closed the app, and now, I got to reopen the fucking app. It's just a pain in my balls. I'm not a Luddite. But, it's just easier for me. I like the handwritten, there's more life to the handwritten notes, too. Even though I can't read my own writing half the time. So, look, this was a good match. The strong women's title match. I like this Azumi. I gotta tell you. And listen, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right because this show had 3 people in the booth. Chris Charlton, Walker Stewart, the Velvet Voice, and Veda Scott. And I'm pretty sure all 3 of them were pronouncing this a different way. So, listen, don't jump in the comments and tell me that I'm right or wrong or how to... It does not fucking matter. Because, as Rich always says, everyone always differs on these things. I was told it's Azumi. Here's what I know. I know it's not AZM. That I don't know. That I know. Mercedes Moné might not know that, but I know it's not AZM. So I go with Azumi. But, like Charlton and Walker were going with like this weird, with the roll of the tongue and saying it all fancy. I don't know what the hell, but they weren't saying Azumi. But anyway, I like this Azumi. Azumi has now impressed me a couple of matches in a row here. And, this might be my top Joshi that I've seen or had exposure to lately because I'm always less than impressed. I talked about it with Rich, I think, last week. I think I'm just setting my bar too high. I'm expecting a quality that just is unrealistic because of the way that people talk it up. Because people who like the Joshi really like the Joshi, if you haven't noticed. And it never meets those unrealistic expectations. I find her to be extremely talented. And I think I talked about that, not on the show, but I did talk about it in the Discord the last time I watched her. And what match was that? That was the match against Toni Storm on Collision. And I went to we got a new room for the paying subscribers on the Discord for live event chat. Subscriber only, and I think I hopped in that room and was like, this AZM, or this Azumi, she's excellent. And she impressed the hell out of me again against Vakir. So, might be my favorite of the old World Wonder Ring Stardom ladies. This one's a lady, right? She's not a minor. 21 years old, a lady. Who's the child? Starlight Kid? Is that the one? How old is she? Starlight Kid is, 22. She's actually older than Azumi. So I was under the impression some of these people were teenagers. They probably were at one point. Azumi has been, everybody was at one point. Shit. She's been wrestling since 2013. This is one of those freak show deals where she was like 8 years old. Okay. Anyway, I enjoyed this match, and I was impressed once again with Azumi. I'm in with Azumi. Don't tell me I'm biased against the Joshi. I got it on wax here. I'm in on Azumi. All right, match number 3. And, by the way, that's when Windsor came out and challenged Vakir. So match number 3 was a 4 corners match for the openweight tag titles. So it was Phantasmo and Hikuleo. They came in as the champs. It was West Coast Wrecking Crew, Nichols and Haste, and Rosser and Tom Lawlor. And then remember, I questioned why they were flying TMDK in from various corners of the fucking globe to work this show when you could just do Guerrillas of Destiny versus one of these other teams. And boy, do I have egg on my face. Old Lanza put himself in another predicament to look stupid because TMDK won the belts. Not only that, you could be saying, well, Joe, you could have just had TMDK versus Guerrillas of Destiny. But wait, there's more. They then shot an angle where the West Coast Wrecking Crew attacked Fred Rossor and Tom Lawlor after the match, cut off Lawlor's hair, and stuffed it down Rossor's throat. So the West Coast Wrecking Crew are frustrated. They were the best looking team in this match, by the way. I was very impressed with their work in the match. They worked their asses off. They do the turn, and now we have the grudge match set up for Ontario, California, between Rosser and Lawlor and the West Coast Wrecking Crew. Nice little ABC booking as Team Filthy just continues to explode. Tom's now a babyface, teaming with his arch rival, the West Coast Wrecking Crew, have turned on him, and away we go. And we have new champions. So a lot got done in this little match, which I thought was high energy and kept it the right length. It didn't feel long. It felt short. And then you had the post-match angle. So a match that I was not looking forward to, I ended up kind of enjoying. And a lot happened there. New champions. Now look, as far as TMDK goes, this is not 2014. These guys, Shane Haste is just done. He just does not care. He's a total gimmick performer at this point. He's over it. I don't know if he's banged up after years of pro wrestling. Mikey Nichols still works hard whenever I watch his Australian stuff. So, but Haste was always, to me, the slightly more talented of the two. Slightly more upside, right? Nichols maybe more sound in his execution. Little less charisma. But Haste is just, he's out there gimmicking it up. He's twerking. He's having fun. They're not the team they used to be. But they're now the strong open-weight tag team champions. Shota Umino versus Jack Perry. Now, this had incredible heat. Everything had good heat on this show. For whatever reason, this had incredible heat. People were into the scapegoat thing. Okay? And this show was on... Well, there you go. It was after the Punk footage was shown on Dynamite on the 10th. This show was on the 12th. So maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe, maybe Tony Khan, maybe the Khan man has gotten Jack Perry over by showing this footage. I know there was nothing much to the footage, but fuck was he over. And look, the crowd was hot. The Chicago fans showed up to this show and then they showed out. They were there to watch some pro wrestling and have a good time, and that's what they did. They were hot for everything, but they were especially hot for this match, and they were especially hot for Jack Perry. Okay, who entered New Japan by attacking Shota Umino. Now, Umino wins the match. Perry might be done with New Japan. I have a feeling he's on his way back into AEW, maybe at the pay-per-view this Sunday, right? But this, if you go back, if you watch, this is one of those matches where if you watch it with the sound off, it doesn't look like much of a match at all. But it didn't have to be because the crowd was so hot that it elevated this match. Sound on, much better match than with the sound off. Which isn't always the case. Sometimes if it's the opposite and you have yourself a dead crowd and you watch with the sound off, it can make a match better than if you're watching this match that nobody's responding to. This was the opposite. So with Perry losing and him being mentioned on AEW TV and, being put over by the Bucks, I have a feeling that he might be done. Watch there be some New Japan match announced already that I don't know about. But, yes, that was that. And Umino, he's getting a title shot. So, again, booking that all made sense, especially by the end of the night. Now, this next match was a piece of shit. Mustafa Ali defeats Hiromu Takahashi. What the fuck was this? I mean, okay, it was garbage. I know that. But what the fuck were they going for here? I mean, first of all, Hiromu comes out with that stupid stuffed animal. And now it has abs or something. You're supposed to think that's cute or funny. I don't know what the fuck you're supposed to think. I just think it's stupid. Okay? Then, during the match, but you roll your eyes, it's Hiromu. Sometimes he brings the stupid stuffed animal. You live with it. But then in the match, they're doing spots around the stuffed animal. What is happening here? I'm a man. I'm 40. I gotta watch pro wrestling spots with a stuffed animal. This is how I have to spend my time. Can we grow the fuck up? Yeah, it makes me mad. It's such a waste of time. And these guys can go. And all right, maybe they didn't have their working shoes on. And, but, I mean, geez. I don't know what this was. This match was just junk. So disappointing. And I'm out on Mustafa Ali. I have now seen enough of his post-WWE run. It isn't interesting. I think Rich nailed it. He comes out, he owns the room, he feels like a star, he looks like a star, then the match happens and you're underwhelmed. You're severely underwhelmed when the match happens. And again, as I pointed out, yeah, he got a late start. This guy's almost 40. He got a late start on his, breakout from the Chicago Indies. This guy turns 39 this year. Okay? So maybe he's got some miles on the fucking tires. Maybe he made his big money and, he's getting big 4-figure payoffs to do these kinds of dates and he's just not interested in, having the kind of matches he had on the Indies, whatever it was, 5 years ago. Again, time is a flat circle. It was probably 10 years ago. Jesus, fuck. It was 2016. It almost was 10 years ago. But man, has this guy just not been interesting. I'm out on Ali. I'm not going to seek out his matches. WrestleMania weekend, he wasn't impressive. He had that match against Amazing Red, where they did the shitty finish and then where he punched him in the dick and then Amazing Red put him over anyway in the post-match and they raised each other. Just come on. Can we pretend, at least during the show, that we're going to suspend disbelief and respect the kayfabe? Can you at least humor us? But anyway, I don't know. This guy's been nothing but a disappointment every time. And I was expecting big things from him. And the whole political gimmick, that can fuck right off. I mean, that's not interesting. So, yeah, I hated this match. Not a good match at all. My one note on my little fucking notepad app for match number 5, here's what it says, and I quote, here's the entire note. Shit! End quote. That's what I thought of this match. Riot rules. So this was all mystery partners for Gabe Kidd and Eddie Kingston. Gabe Kidd's weren't much of a mystery. I mean, it was the fucking War Dogs. It was Clark Connors, David Finlay, Kenta flying back and forth from America and Japan, racking up those frequent flyer miles. Defy WrestleMania weekend, back to Japan to win the tag titles, back to America to Chicago. I mean, geez. I guess he lives in America now, right? But you get the idea. And Kingston's partners were Jeff Cobb, TJP, and Homicide. And they walked around, did a bunch of plunder, and I didn't give a shit about any of it. That's what this was. And the Bullet Club side wins. And Gabe Kidd, he's probably going to beat Eddie Kingston for that title in the no ropes gimmick in London or Ontario. I was in London, Ontario, but this is Ontario, California. Coming up on, I guess, that whatever that is, the 11th or whatever. So I think he'll win that match. We'll see. But I just, I had no use for this Riot Rules match. Had enough. Zack Saber Jr. versus Matt Riddle. So Riddle loses the TV title that he's been really defending all over the world. Or at least all over the United States. Loses it back to Zack Saber. Just under the gun, 15-minute time limit rules. He won it in just over 13 minutes. Riddle was very cocky and playing heel towards the end of this. At one point, he hit one of his flippy-do gimmicks off the top rope for a near fall, and he did the shocked NXT face. That annoyed me. Guy was in WWE for a long time, and he picked up the shocked NXT face. He never did that shit on his first indie run. This is another guy. I think he's been a little better than Ali, because Riddle has had some matches that I've enjoyed. The Fatu match in MLW. The Bad Dude Tito match, title defense. Because to set this up, the idea was Riddle had gone through a lot of the TMDK guys. Bad Dude Tito and Kosei Fujita. And, now he's taking on Saber, who's the former champion. And Saber did win the title back. I don't think Riddle is booked for anything moving forward. And, I had heard it was a 4 or 5 match deal or whatever it was with New Japan. I don't know how many he ultimately worked. The early word was that he wasn't even going to be working in Japan, but obviously he did go to Japan to win the title. So, he could be wrapping up. I don't have that confirmed or anything, but it sure feels that way. He totally no-sold the loss. He just rolled out of the ring like Hideki Suzuki and was slapping five with fans. And, so I don't know. It's, if this is it for his little New Japan run, I mean, it was fine, but, again, underwhelming as he has been. He's not the guy he used to be. On his first indie run where he looked like one of the best wrestlers in the world. But again, this is another dude that is pushing 40 with a lot of miles. And he lives, suffice to say, a rugged lifestyle. He's in great shape, obviously, aesthetically. And this match was pretty good. Don't get me wrong. This was a pretty good match. But, you're kind of... with these two guys, had this been Evolve or something, you're expecting a great match, not, a decent little match in the middle of the card. And they had a match in at WrestleMania weekend in 2018 at one of the Evolve or one of the Gabe shows. And, Matt Riddle, beat Zack Sabre in that main event. I was at that show. And that was a great match. So, these guys have wrestled before. I think, they've had other matches as well. It's not like this is the first time they were in the ring together. And, this is not one of their better matches. Didn't they have a match in Dallas too? Maybe that's the one I was at. They had a good match in Dallas too. Yeah, they wrestled on the show with Ricochet versus Will Ospreay, which was one of the best live matches I've ever seen. On that great, and all those shows were great, one of those great shows from Eddie Dean's Ranch in 2016. That may have been where WrestleMania weekend peaked. I mean, fuck, look at these cards. I know some of these people are canceled, But listen, OJ ran for those yards, and these matches happened. So, we didn't know they were going to get canceled. But maybe some people knew some of these people would be canceled. But the point is, these guys have a long history of matches, Saber and Riddle. And this is, this was a good match, but, not one of their better matches. That, I can say. Nick Nemeth defeats Tomohiro Ishii, Big Tom Ish. Not a title match. Not a title match. This was supposed to be Tanahashi. That match is going to happen. It has been booked. We'll talk about it in a minute. But Nemeth beats Ishii again. A good match, but by Tomohiro Ishii standards, no. Nemeth did work Ishii's match, though. He wasn't afraid to mix it up, but it didn't reach the usual Ishii heights. I didn't love this show. Like I said, it wasn't a bad show. I didn't love the show. And then Moxley beat Tetsuya Naito for the title. I thought this was the best match on the show, and I thought that it was worked in a very rugged style. It was very much a Jon Moxley match. Yeah, he was bleeding all over the place, but even more than that, he brought the physicality to Tetsuya Naito. And, I felt like, people thought this was a 50-50 match coming in. I feel like the crowd thought it was a 50-50 match coming in. Naito certainly had his fans there. I think there were plenty of people who were pulling for Mox. There were plenty of people who wanted to see an IWGP title change. Maybe if you weren't at MSG in 2019, where Okada won the title from Jay White. I'll never forget that. But, hey, I got to talk to my man John Muse, because he was saying that seeing an IWGP title change was kind of his white whale. And I think he went to the show, and I haven't talked to him since the show. So good for John Muse if he was there. And if you're listening, hit me up, because I'll probably forget, and let me know. Because he was talking about, hey, we talked, excuse me. We've been talking for the last month, and he's like, yeah, man, do you think Mox can win? Because I've never seen an IWGP title change, and I'd like to see one. And I was like, I think there's a chance. So I hope he went. I hope that he went, because otherwise, I don't know how many more times this title's going to change hands in America. He might have to hop on the plane and go back to Japan. I think he's been there before. But Moxley wins. I thought it was a rugged match. I thought it was the best match on the show. I'd go like 4 or 4.25 on it. Nothing else was notebook quality on this show. A couple matches flirted with it, but nothing really got there. Maybe a couple 3.5-star matches, maybe. And then the rest of the stuff was in the 3-star range, and then a few matches were, well, like Ali Takahashi, that's fucking garbage. That's like a 1-star match. It was terrible. But we have ourselves a new world champ, and Moxley cuts a promo talking about how it's been 5 years, and he's dreamt of this. And he's talking about how he's going to defend the title against Shooter, but then Ren Narita comes out of nowhere, attacks him with some kind of fucking foreign object. Some kind of international object. Look like a sound bar from like that people had on their TVs 20 years ago or whatever. People still have those things? I don't even know. They probably do. It's interesting because Narita was wearing white sneakers and he got Moxley's blood all over his kicks. So then Shooter came out and ran Narita off, and it set up the 2 title matches that I talked about. So, and the angle had good heat. You know, Ren Narita angle had good heat. This crowd was hot, and they were into all this shit. So, good for them. And Mox is your champ. So, let's talk about what we have coming up. First of all, let's quickly talk about this show they had in Taiwan. Now, I haven't seen this. It was a couple days after Windy City Riot, but they crowned new Never Open Man 6-man champions at a little mini tournament. And Oleg Boltin is now a New Japan champion. Not an IWGP champion, but a Never Openweight 6-man champion with Hiroshi Tanahashi, who is back, and Toru Yano. They won. I can't believe it. I thought House of Torture would win this tournament, but they beat House of Torture. Evil Show and Yoshinobu Kanemaru in the final. The match is not rated well on Cage Match. I haven't heard good things from people who have seen it. But so I'm probably never going to watch it. But how about Oleg Boltin? I like Oleg Boltin. And now he's a champion. And check his Twitter timeline. He had an adorable tweet where his little girl had the Never Openweight belt. So good for him. You know, I know we're cynical fucks and we call these people marks all the time for wanting time. But look, it's nice. The guy won a New Japan title. He's proud of himself. Taking pictures with his kid with the belt. It's sweet. On that same show, Dookie defeated Kosei Fujita for the number 1 contendership. Because remember, Yo got injured. Yo is now out of the Super Juniors as well. He's not going to be able to work that tour. So Dookie beat Kosei Fujita, and he will be the next challenger, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Bishiman also defeated Sanada and Yuya Uemura to retain the IWGP Tag Team titles. So Taiwan got a good little show here. 800 fans in New Taipei, Taiwan. Starlight Kid over Hanako. I don't know anything about Hanako. Let's see if that's a grown adult. 23. 13-30, unmarried. That's what Marigold's going for. 13-30, unmarried. Satoshi Kojima and Tiger Mask over Despy and Shoma Kaito. Huh. Hey, Despy teaming with a young boy. And Kojima actually working a New Japan match. How about that? So anyway, that was the Taiwan show that I'll never watch. Now, let's dig into this Dantaku tour. Korakuen Hall, 2 nights, 22nd and 23rd. On the 22nd is the Faction Warfare Gauntlet with the United Empire versus just 5 guys. So obviously all 5 of the 5 guys. And it's Callum Newman, Francisco Akira, the good Italian boy, Okan Cobb, and TJP. That's a Faction Warfare Gauntlet match. And then the next night in Korakuen Hall, they're doing a gimmick where it's LIJ versus the War Dogs in a best of 5. Now, what's interesting about the best of 5 is the main event is Hiromu and David Finlay. It's going to come down to the main event, obviously. So that means it has to be 2-2 going into the final. Well, if you look at the matchups, Yota Tsuji's wrestling Gato. there is a 0% chance that Gaeto's winning that match. So that's one win for LIJ. Tetsuya Naito is not losing to Drilla Maloney. Okay? So that's 2 wins for LIJ. That means the War Dogs have to win the other 2 matches. Okay, so Gabe Kidd is going to beat Bushi. That's, obviously predictable. But the other match is Shingo versus Clark Connors. Clark Connors is going to beat Shingo. That's happening. And that's like a big result for Clark Connors. I know Shingo has been downcycled to some degree, the King of Pro Wrestling stuff, where he worked his ass off, by the way. I think in the current state of this company, Shingo should be a top guy. But when Gato moves on, he moves on hard. And I think he has moved on from Shingo. He's going to lose that match. Otherwise, LIJ has all this shit wrapped up before the main event. They're not going to do that. And I think Finlay probably beats Hiromu. So, also on that Korakuen show, the first title defense for Tanahashi, Oleg, Bolton, and Toru Yano against Evil Show and Yujiro. So they beat Evil Show and Kanemaru in the final. They'll face Evil Show and Yujiro in their first title defense. So that's Korakuen Hall, 22nd, 23rd, back-to-back shows, excuse me, in Korakuen. Then they have the in Kagoshima, they have the Satsuma no Kuni show that they have every year, and sometimes there's big matches on that, and there is this year. Junior tag titles, Connors and Maloney versus Bushi and Hiromu. And that's the show where Sho will defend the junior title against Dookie. So both junior titles will be defended in Kagoshima with the junior title match on top. And wouldn't it be something if Dookie wins and goes into Super Juniors as champion? I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be Sho and his stupid wrench. But that's a show to keep an eye on. And then, of course, the 2 Wrestling Dontaku shows that close the tour. This is where Moxley comes into town. This is Fukuoka. Not going to go through the whole show. The key stuff on top. Zack Saber Jr. defends against Jeff Cobb, who came out to challenge him in Chicago. I forgot to mention that. David Finlay versus Yota Tsuji in a very interesting match. I don't know who's winning that. And then Nick Nemeth defends the global title against Hiroshi Tanahashi, the match that he should have had in Chicago, but now he's getting it in Fukuoka. Which is interesting because if he would have gotten the Hiroshi Tanahashi match in Chicago, would they have even flown him to Japan? And if not, what would the main event of this show have been? So, I don't know what's going on with Nemeth. I'm under the impression he's under the same kind of 4 or 5 match deal that Riddle was under, or is under, if he's not done, but I think he's done, right? So we'll see. Now, there's a lot of grumbling on the New Japan roster and people upset about these short-term deals that Nemeth and Riddle signed and the fact that they may have been required to be belted up as per those deals, which is why both guys won titles on their first matches in. And they may have been required to win titles and defend titles against Hiroshi Tanahashi as per their deals. That's what some people on the roster think, and that's what some people are unhappy about. So there's a lot of people upset that they took a title off of Finlay, who's been a hardworking guy for a lot of years. And Nemeth comes in and beats him for a belt. And, there's some rumblings on the roster. I don't, that's the talk. That's the talk. But, we see if Nemeth now loses the title back to Tanahashi, and then in effect it would be Tanahashi losing the TV title, and then later winning the global title, which is, it's higher on the hierarchy. And then Dontaku Night 2 in Fukuoka, which is the business end of that, has Tanahashi teaming with Nemeth against Sanada and Taichi. So it's a respectful title match the night before in Fukuoka. And then the tag team titles, Bishamon versus Chase Owens and Kenta, the rematch that the whole world needed and wanted. Shingo defends the Never title against Gabe Kidd. Now, if Shingo's going to lose to Clark Connors, see, man, that 5-match series is just so weird because is Gabe Kidd going to cost him the match against Clark Connors? That's all I can come up with. Because Kaito is not beating Yota Tsuji. And Drilla Maloney is not beating Tetsuya Naito. I mean, it's not happening. But Shingo has a match coming up with Gabe Kidd, not Clark Connors, for this title. So it must mean Gabe Kidd's going to cost Shingo that match. Or Naito's going to get upset by Drilla Maloney. I don't see it. Or is there going to be some shenanigans and Gaito's going to pull off a win over Yota Tsuji? I don't see it. And then that's where they're doing Moxley Ren Narita. So we'll see how these two shows draw. New Japan, we've talked about it a million. They're holding up better attendance-wise in both countries than a lot of people might think, even though we're nowhere near where we were pre-pandemic. They're treading water. And then, we already talked about Resurgence, which kicks off, which is the same night as Best of the Super Juniors kicks off. So, that's what's going on in New Japan. Clap, get into it. I'll tell you what you should clap and get into. Pro Wrestling Noah. I watched this Star Navigation show. Now listen. Was this some kind of great show? No. But, I think that there's, not that Star. What am I talking about? Star Navigation. The Star Navigation from, Star Navigation from April 11th. Fuck, man. This is the end of a long show. I'm running out of steam here. Again, look, was this a great show? No, but this was a fun and entertaining show. Really top to bottom, which has kind of been the new trademark of Noah this year, like I talked about at the top. And there's kind of a new energy in Noah. The shows feel energetic again. After just the dire, boring, dreadful feeling that Noah shows were giving people last year. And, you toss in these Monday Magic shows, which have been a big-time success from a critical standpoint. Okay? And then when you toss in, like the other, like last week, they did those back-to-back shows in Shinagawa. They did 2 shows on the 14th in Shinagawa. Loaded with singles matches, which, you know how Japan books. So it's always fun when you get singles bouts, even if they're predictable, right? We know Alejandro's not knocking off Wagner 3. We know Junta Miyawaki isn't going to beat Kenoh. We know these things. Jake Lee's going to handle Katoge and all of that. But those are fun, interesting shows and these Monday Magic shows. And I'm going to talk about some of the stuff they have coming up after I review this show for you. It's just Noah, and it's got the unique roster. You have these, these lucha guys. You have fucking Ninja Mac running around with the hardcore title. The GHC hardcore title. You got good-looking guys. You got El Hijo D. Dr. Wagner Jr. is the fucking champion. Jake Lee looking like Mr. Peanut. Then you have the throwbacks on the roster, like the Noah originals, like Takashi Sagera, Marufuji. Yeah, Go Shiozaki clotheslining people into next week. Yoshinori Ogawa still running around. Then every now and then they still bring in the shooters. You still get, old Ironhead Fujita showing up. It's just such a eclectic roster, a weird roster. But when the fans are into the shows and the shows are fun, and they're thinking outside the box and doing different things booking-wise, Noah feels like it has some new life here. So, we're going to go over this show quickly, and then we're going to talk a bit about what Noah has coming up, because I think they have a lot of interesting things coming up. So, Ninja Mac. They open this up with a 3-way. Ninja Mac, Alejandro, and Alpha Wolf. I mean, this isn't your fucking father's Pro Wrestling Noah. It's opening up with the wacky 3-way. with the flippy-do guys. And Ninja Mac is this hardcore champion, which, this hardcore openweight title goes back a number of years. I remember this thing back in the golden days of fucking Noah, but then it just went away for years. And they brought it back with Masato Tanaka last year, and Ninja Mac is the champion now. And he has a very interesting title defense coming up against Tsuji Ishikawa, of all people, who came out and challenged him on one of those Monday Magic shows I was talking about. And he wins the three-way match here over Alejandro and Alpha Wolf. Then he successfully defends the hardcore title against Alpha Wolf on the Monday Magic show in Shinjuku Face, and Tsuji Ishikawa comes out and issues the challenge. So Ninja Mac versus the Big Dog is a match that's going to happen in real life in 2024. That's pro wrestling, Noah. It's wacky, it's wild, and all of a sudden it's very fun. Daisuke Inaba defeats Yu Iwata. Yu Iwata is a good-looking young rookie they have. Daisuke Inaba is a solid backbone veteran hand for the roster who usually works in the first half of the show. And it was a perfectly fine 2 3/4 wrestling match featuring a good young rookie. Anthony Green, Tarasuke, and Yohei, representing good-looking guys, defeated Atsushi Katoge, Hiroki, and Muhammad Yone. Anthony Green, one half of the tag champs, good-looking guys, getting the big shove with Jack Morris and Jake Lee, always in title contention. So they pick up a win here in this 6-man match. Then there was another 6-man match. Daga, the much improved Daga, believe it or not, Yoshinori Ogawa and Oka Sasaki, that former shoot fighter that we have talked about on this show, that Grant Akuma talked about on this show. They defeat Hajime Ohara, Junta Miyawaki, and Tsuji Kondo. And this was a knockout finish win for Sasaki, who they seem to like. So we see what happens there. And then the business end of the card was Hayata winning the national title from Jack Morris. And now look, was this a great match? No. Did I enjoy the fuck out of this match? I did. They repeated the finish from the tag match where Hayata pinned Jack Morris to earn the title shot, where he caught him in the roll up clutch deal and then held on to the middle rope. They did the same finish here, and they repeated a bunch of spots from that match. So Hayata used the same game plan that he used to earn the title shot to then win the title from Jack Morris. So Jack Morris is a double champion no more. Hayata's the national champion. Jack Morris is irate, right? So very enjoyable. And Jack Morris, again, he just leaps off the screen. I am all in on Jack Morris. I am out on Mustafa Ali, and I am now the chips are in the middle of the table for Jack Morris. I'm telling you, this guy, and you guys know I'm good at this. There's been a lot of controversy around Trick Williams on the old Twitter app. Who told you guys Trick Williams was gonna be a guy the first time he saw him on TV before he even did his first wrist lock on television? I did. I got an eye for this. And Jack Morris, I'm telling you, he's going to be a guy. He has a chance to be a guy. Lost his title here. But again, he was the one who shined. He just jumps off the screen lately. It's so fun when you see a pro wrestler finally starting to get it. And Jack Morris, who was solid the moment he stepped into Noah, now he's really starting to get it. I'm so impressed with him. 8-man tag. And it's personality that he's showing more than, his work. It's coming through his work as well. I talked about those Noah, Marufuji, Segura, Ironhead Fujita, and Goshi Ozaki. They defeat Wagner 3, Jake Lee, Masa Kitamiya, and Rohei Oiwa. Now, this was the semi-main event. It had good heat. I mean, that's the one thing with Noah so far this year. Much better heat in the buildings than they had last year. So whatever they're doing, there's better crowd connection in this company right now than there was in 2023. And, Rohei Oiwa, obviously, on his excursion from New Japan with pro wrestling, Noah, this was high energy. And, it didn't overstay its welcome. He got isolated with Go Shiozaki in the end. And he showed, they gave him a fighting spirit spot and he ate a lariat. And then he eats another lariat and gets pinned. And his chest is fucking mincemeat by the end. And, it's one of those situations where he's going to eat the L, but he looks good. It helps him. He looks good doing so because he showed fight. And that's why we love Pearl, right? So, and Go Shiozaki, you almost forget the guy exists. He gets injured a lot. He disappears. But he's kind of like my baseline. Like, if you're better than Go Shiozaki, you're a great pro wrestler. He is my line in the sand for are you a great pro wrestler? Throw a wrestler at me. Throw one at me. I'll ask myself, do I think he's better than Go Shiozaki? If the answer is yes, that's a great pro wrestler. If the answer is no, it might not be a great pro wrestler. It might just be a good pro wrestler. Or a very good pro wrestler. But they're not a great pro wrestler. You got to be better than Go Shiozaki. Because that guy's a great pro wrestler, but he's like the last guy let in the club. Like, he's on the list, right? But you're letting other people in first, but he still gets in because he's great. But he's the baseline. You got to be better than Go Shiozaki to be a great pro wrestler in my eyes. Because that guy fucking rules. I've always enjoyed him. Saw him live 1,000,000 times in Ring of Honor. I mean, he's a great pro wrestler. And then Kaito Kiyomiya Kenoh, which was marketed as for the final time. And you guys know that I love their series of matches. And, they've had these great matches over the years that, they very often end in KO because they're just knocking each other the fuck out, right? And they might not be on the level of the Kenoh matches against Nakajima. That's another great series, and I love those matches. And those two, like, bunch of KO finishes. But this series of matches, if you remember, this started, it was, one of the New Year's shows a couple years ago. And Kenoh won that one, I think, by knockout. And then Kiyomiya beat him later in the year for the GHC title. That was not his first title win. The first title win was the one a few years earlier where they put the title on him way too early. So this is like his second title win. And, and then they've had a couple matches since then. And they build this match as the final matchup between the two. And it only drew 935 fans to Korakuen Hall, which is a very, very disappointing number, especially for a match that they built up for a number of weeks as this huge deal and the final time these two guys would wrestle. And they've had important matches and great matches before and meaningful matches. And this has been a meaningful feud. And to bill it as the final match and draw under 1,000 is massively disappointing. And it only speaks to the dead horse I'm about to beat and of the damage they have done to Kaito Kiyomiya and the damage that Keiji Muto did to Kaito Kiyomiya. And it was a little sad watching Kaito Kiyomiya continue to do Muto tributes at the end of this match. And he, using the Shining Wizard and everything and beating Kenoh. Presumably the last time they're ever going to wrestle. He has won all of the matches since Kenoh beat him the first time. And just continuing to do tribute spots of a guy who completely derailed his career. And there's a lot of people who think that Kaito Kiyomiya is one of the best wrestlers in the world. There's some people who think he's the best wrestler in the world. I don't agree with that. I like him a lot. I think he's really great. I don't think he's the best wrestler in the world. I don't even think he should be in that conversation. He's very good. He might be one of the top 25 wrestlers in the world. He's definitely in the top 50 wrestlers in the world. But just the damage that they did to this guy while Muto was in the company. And if it wasn't obvious before, it should have been. And if it should be obvious now. Where a huge match like this against Kenoh. Now, Kenoh's not some mega draw either, but you would expect this match, billed as the last time these two guys are going to wrestle, to put more than 900 people into Korakuen Hall. And Kiyomiya is just not a draw. And I believe it's the damage that was done while Muto was in the company. and Muto not putting him over sufficiently. And he looks like an absolute geek continuing to do Muto cosplay. Just go back to the Misawa cosplay, please. It's less humiliating. But if I'm going to put Noah over for how good they've been this year, I got to be brutally honest about this attendance. It's bad. And it proves what I was saying for years. Anyway, this was worked with a lot of intensity, faster, and a faster, harder pace than some of the other matches they've had. And I thought it was a good match. I didn't think it was a great match. I had a lot of people telling me, Joe, you got to watch this. The ensuing days after the match happened, I got a million messages from friends telling me, Joe, you got to watch this match. And, I'm not trying to piss in people's cornflakes. I thought it was a really good match. I really did. I didn't think it hit a next gear, and I didn't think it got to great. It certainly wasn't a waste of my time. It's a match I would recommend that people watch, because I think it's a good match and an interesting match. I just didn't think it was a great match. But a lot of people did think it was a great match. And Kiyomiya wins, and presumably puts Kenoh in the rear view. We'll see about that. I don't know if I trust it. I have a feeling they'll wrestle again. But Noah's got some really interesting stuff coming up. So on the next Monday Magic, we've got Kaito Kiyomiya coming off this win, taking on Jake Lee for the number one contendership. And then the winner of that is going to face Wagner 3 Sumo Hall May 4th. And that's the huge Sumo Hall show they have coming up on May 4th. It's going to be interesting to see how they draw with Wagner on top defending the title. I'm sure they're going to load it up with some veteran, older names. But you figure it's going to be Kaito Kiyomiya. I don't see them going right back to Jake Lee, right? But it's Noah, and their booking can be weird. So you don't know. But I think Kiyomiya will win that number one contender match. On the same show, they have Jack Morris and Anthony Green open challenge for the tag team titles. That's the Monday Magic gimmick. It's big surprises. So we see who gets that title shot. And I know that Titus Alexander and Starboy Charlie are headed to Marvelous to do some training in Japan. I think that they're ready. And a little birdie told me they'll be showing up in Noah at some point. Are they going to be the mystery challengers here? I don't know. I don't think so. I heard another match proposed for them for their debut in Noah, but I do think those two guys are coming in. I'm pretty confident in that. Came from a pretty good source. So I don't even know if that's any kind of look. I don't even know if that's a scoop. Maybe that's known, but someone did make it a point to go out of their way and tell me they're coming in, and he gave me possible opponents. Maybe that's been announced already and I sound like a goof. Who knows? But won't give it away in case, it's going to ruin a surprise or something. But yeah, so that's what's coming up on the next Monday Magic. And then Sumo Hall, on top of Wagner 3 against the Kiyomiya Lee winner, that's where they're doing Ninja Mac against Tsuji Ishikawa for the hardcore title. So again, look, they're going to load up that Sumo Hall show. So we got Tsuji Ishikawa coming in, the big dog. That's such an interesting match against Ninja Mac against Tsuji Ishikawa. Are you fucking kidding me? They're doing these limit break shows too. There's just so many interesting things. On the April 27th limit break, remember, was it last week or the week before? Talked with Rich, new 0-1 world champion, Akitoshi Saito. And they shot the big angle with Satsuki Nagao. Well, they're doing that match on the 27th on the limit break show. So that's where we're getting the 0-1 title match that they built on the 0-1 charity show a couple of weeks ago. So that's another interesting match Noah has coming up. I have morbid curiosity. Is it morbid? Would you consider it morbid curiosity? I have morbid curiosity in Akitoshi Saito as 0-1 champion. That's fascinating to me. Never been a singles champ. Well over 50. 0-1, desperate and willing to try anything. And we'll see if he retains on the 27th. I'm into it. I'm into the storyline around the 0-1 world title. I'm more into that than I was into Cody going after Roman. Because I'm a sick fucking freak. That's why. I love pro wrestling. I love it. I love it, guys. I complain about it a lot. But man, sometimes I just get into the pro wrestling in unexpected ways. How about that for a solo flagship? 3 hours, high energy. Coco Beware, Owen Hart. We did the thing. Clap, get into it. I'll see you next week with Craich.
Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragon Gate is, how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragon Gate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.